Please turn on your microphones so they're green. In accordance with Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, be advised that a notice of this meeting was made by posting on the bulletin board, town hall, and mailing to the officially designated newspapers a list of the meeting dates annually, indicating that this meeting would take place at the town hall at 7:30 p.m. on Wednesday, April 19th, 2023. Roll call.
Corey Dillon,
Present.
Allison Canfield.
Here.
Michael Cohen.
Here.
Maggie Niggins.
Here.
Deborah Nevis.
Here.
Sweetie Vejan.
Here. No, I did that.
David Cosgrove.
Here.
Michael Zion. That's all.
Here.
Is
I wanted to let you know that Michael has been read the oath tonight, so I just want to state for the record, Michael is our new second alternate and has been administered the oath by Ed Buzak just before we officially began the meeting. So welcome to the board. So we are missing, as of now, Gaston and Sujata for tonight, but if they attend, we'll call them in. There was an approval of minutes of 3:15:23 on the agenda. We are deferring that because they just were distributed today and may have some changes before we're ready to approve them. So we'll hold on that item of business, or defer it, I should say, to the May meeting. Okay, we're going to begin with the first matter that was carried from the March 15th meeting, application 23001, Stringer Developments LLC for major subdivision approval.
Madam Chair, one of the things that we had talked about during a discussion between you and me was that we need to swear in the experts from the planning board that we normally do at the reorganization meeting. But we didn't, we haven't had an application, so that's fine. But why don't we do that before we start this application, if we could?
That's great. While Mr. Soselo is setting up, we'll
I
begin.
think it would be Mr. Petto and our engineer.
Martha, you haven't been sworn in yet for the year.
For the year, because what we do, we'll swear you in for the year and we'll announce that.
No?
No, it doesn't
Okay.
provide it.
Thank
So if both of you can just come up over here and grab the final.
You can face
Great. Sorry. With your right hand on Bible, with your left hand, we swear that any testimony that you will give tonight or at any of the meetings during the course of this year, 2023, before the planning board of the township of Milburn, will be true and accurate to the best of your ability. And you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's back. I see you.
nice seeing you, Ed.
Great, thank you to the applicants for allowing us to swear in our professionals.
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board. My name is Anthony Cersillo. I'm with the law offices of Levitt and Cersillo in Milburn. On behalf of Stringer Developers LLC, we come before this board seeking preliminary and final major subdivision approval for a total of 2 conforming residential lots, each containing a single-family dwelling. I have one witness, Mr. Giovanni John Manilio, will testify that the proposed subdivision requires removal of all existing improvements other than the existing masonry wall on the rear lot line. Requires no variance relief. Complies with the DRZ ordinance and requires waivers from DRZ Section 509 Environmental Impact Statement, Section 525 Stormwater Runoff, and certain other checklist items. Proof of service was filed in February 2023. I acknowledge with the team receipt of the township professional reports, engineering, planning, fire, and police departments, including Bart Ross and Partners report to the HPC.
Thank you, Mr. Cersillo. I apologize. I'm going to interrupt to note for the record that Sujata Shan has joined the board at 7:37. And will that count as her hearing the application in full because they have not brought about any witnesses yet?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I'd like to call my witness.
I will allow you to do so. While your witness is coming up, I would like to just explain for the audience. I know we have a number of members of the public here. I don't know if you're here for this or the subsequent application, but let me talk you through the process just so you have an understanding. We just had our introduction on the application. We will be hearing from a witness. Pause for one moment. Good evening. Let the record show Gaston Hubbard joined our meeting at 7:38 p.m. Welcome. Thank you. So we have our first witness who will be providing testimony. The attorney will ask questions and we will hear an explanation. The planning board as well as members of the public. Following the testimony, members of the board will be allowed to engage, ask questions, and seek responses. Following that, I will ask if any members of the public have questions for this witness. If anybody has a specific question, not a statement, but just a question that the witness can respond to. At that point, he will give a response if he's able to. Concluding any witness testimony, that's when the board will have a discussion. I believe we have somebody who will be answering available to answer further questions on reports and documents that we have received from township committees, the historical committee. And then following all of that, we will then ask if any members of the public have any statements they would like to make on the record, and they would come up, be sworn in, be allowed to make a statement. Following that, the board will discuss and then take a vote if there is a vote to be taken. Sound right?
Well, good, well done.
Okay, so that's
Madam
it.
Chair, I'd like to recuse on this because I have worked with these builders before, so I'd like to recuse on this
That
application.
is totally fine. I appreciate that to avoid potential conflict of interest. So if you're going to recuse, will you wait out but
I shall.
remain for the evening?
Thank you.
Okay,
I'll be back.
we will call as needed.
Thank
Okay, that said, please.
Thank you. So just before I start, is the easel okay there, or do you guys prefer a different location?
The easel's okay if you could rotate it
Sure.
so both the board and members of the audience can see it, and then I believe we're gonna have you sworn in.
If you would just raise your right hand, please. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in tonight's proceedings to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
If you would just state your name, spelling your name for the record,
Sure.
please.
Giovanni, Giovanni, last name Manilio, Manilio, with the firm of Mantera Design, address of 62 Grove Street in Somerville, New Jersey.
Mr. Manilio, can you tell the board your professional credentials as a civil engineer?
Yes, I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Syracuse University. I've been licensed in the state of New Jersey for 15 years and currently licensed. I'm currently licensed in New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and have testified in front of numerous boards throughout the state.
We're hearing you as a civil engineer.
Civil
As a civil
engineer.
engineer, I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, that's fine. You're welcome. Appreciate it.
What have you reviewed, prepared, and inspected in anticipation of your testimony tonight for preliminary and final major subdivision approval?
Yeah, so our office and myself has prepared the plans in question, and I've visited sites on 2 occasions.
Let's go over our request for waivers, please, first.
Sure, there are several waivers that we're asking for, and most of these are partial waivers. We're asking them to be deferred to the time of plot plans or building permits. But the first one is not. It is the request for an EIS or environmental impact statement. As the site is currently fully developed, there's no wetlands, no flood hazard, no streams. The only thing that there is on the site is 3% of the lot is steep slopes, but that's the only critical area on the site. We think that this is suitable for a waiver on the EIS. And I believe your board professional had agreed as well.
Great, thank you. So we would, before continuing as a board, we would have a discussion and then move to approve whether we will go forward with the application, if we would grant them the waiver for the environmental impact.
Sure, you want me to go through the rest of them?
Yeah, there are.
Okay.
Okay.
And these are all completeness waivers that we're talking about?
Correct.
Okay.
Stormwater runoff, again, this is a temporary waiver, as we don't have a house or a design for the 2 lots as of right now. We are asking that to be deferred at the time of plot plans, which is typical for an existing lot. Next, we're asking for a waiver on the overlap of topography. The checklist requires 100 feet overlap past the property. We do have a little bit overlap, but not of 100 feet. Reason being is we're not proposing to change the grades off-site or the drainage direction. Next item is building plans. Again, this is a subdivision. We're asking for a fully conforming subdivision. At this time, building plans have not been created, but they will be created and submitted for building permits and zoning and engineering review. Facilities plan, this is similar to stormwater runoff, to provide drainage as part of the plot plans, is what we're providing. Soil erosion and sediment control, again, we're deferring to time of plot plans, as we know what the disturbance is, we could provide accurate numbers on that. And last is the sustainability checklist, that's based on green building improvements that are being proposed, as we don't have a building or a house proposed, that would be done at the time of building permits.
Can you just clarify, when you reference plot plans, what you mean by that?
Yeah, so a plot plan is the engineer plan, so it shows the house footprint, it shows all the improvements, it shows compliance with the zoning as far as impervious coverage, building coverage, floor area, building height. It'll also show all the grading of the house, spot elevations, drainage as far as seepage pitch or dry wells, any proposed trees or tree replacement will also be shown on there.
Great, and if I ask another follow-up question, just want to make sure I'm hearing this correctly, that the proposed application is for the demolition and subdivision of the property with no intention or no indication of where the future potential buildings would exist on the properties, and that's why you're seeking these variances,
Correct, and
waivers and stuff?
yep, and you'll hear further in my testimony how both houses will be fully compliant.
Okay. Were there any other waiver
I
requests?
believe that's all of them.
Okay, I have stormwater, property overlap, building plans,
Facilities,
plot plans, facilities, and then there was one last one.
sustainability checklist,
Sustainability, okay.
and
checklist,
the
right,
EIS, yeah.
correct. And all per the testimony that in general, these will all be addressed at the time of approving upon, except for the
With
EIS, at the time of approving upon a lot. Okay.
Correct.
That said, I repeat my former statement, which is that we as a board can discuss and will potentially do them one by one if needed, or potentially as a group, if we are inclined to award the waivers to continue and hear the application as such. Concerns or questions from any members of the board?
Madam Chair, I do have a concern, basically on not knowing what structures the building itself. So I agree with all the other waivers except for, what the structures are gonna look like. And I think it goes and follows our master plan element and how it's worded, if I can, for 1 minute, is to, and basically, let me find it real here, support, asking basically for the design. So what we're doing is we're not actually asking them. So in goals and objectives, goal 5, 6, there's some pieces that we probably need to look at as a board. We have no idea what's currently being put there, design-wise. And
You're talking about the proposed development that would ultimately go?
Yes, so
But
I'm
that,
not,
I don't think that's part of this application.
Correct,
I
we're
just
just
want to
seeking-
clarify.
Yeah, we're seeking a subdivision into 2 lots, 2 fully conforming lots.
correct, but once we agree to the subdivision, then there is no other avenue for us to understand what's going on.
There's
that
existing
particular
zoning. Right,
zone.
but they would have to comply, anything that is designed would have to comply with zoning or seek a waiver or a variance. If they
But
were
on
to.
the master plan, it's promote clear, user-friendly, and transparent application. And as we have people in this community, I think it's fair for them to see what is being built in this subdivision that meets the requirements. And that is to safeguard the community or that particular area.
I understand that concern, I'm not sure that, I don't know.
I don't believe that's your
I don't believe,
jurisdiction.
yeah, that is within, are you understanding Ms. Canfield's
Yeah,
question?
yes, I do, and I think your reaction is correct. All we're approving, if we approve tonight, or we request to approve, is divide this larger 62,000 odd square foot lot into two conforming lots. There's no building proposed on it at this time, and it's no different than if there were an existing lot, vacant lot, and someone wants to come in and build a house on it. The planning board, neither the planning board nor the board of adjustment have any jurisdiction unless the applicant is seeking a variance from some requirement of the zoning ordinance, then they have to apply to the board of adjustment. So, while it would be, if they had plans for a house, I'm sure they'd give it to us, so I would think they'd give it to us, because we've seen that before. In this case, they don't have that, and they're not required to have it, and we can't compel them to have it.
Right, I see where you're going, and I think I agree with that sentiment that, we have a goal and we have a desire to, create and encourage and support, communities that look consistent and.
Well, it's written in our master plan,
Exactly, I
goal
agree.
number 5, and I
Right.
think that's something that we should uphold. And that is to encourage the preservation and restoration of that particular site. Whatever that is, to me, that's what my responsibility is. So to me, this application is not complete under the master plan and how it currently reads.
Well, I think,
But we're
if I
not-
might, I think that the master plan's objective is to serve as a plan which is implemented by zoning ordinances. And there's many things I think you'll find in the master plan that talks about the goals and objectives of what we're trying to accomplish. But the master plan in and of itself is not an independently enforceable document. What is enforceable are the ordinances that derive from the implementation of that master plan. And in this case, and this is not unusual at all, the subdivision ordinances do not deal with the actual construction that takes place on the lot itself. Those are handled under other aspects of the law.
But, so I think, as to echo Ed's or to re-paraphrase, while this is saying what we intend and we hand to our governing body to say this is the intention and this is the hopes of the community and the planning board, it's what we are asked to do tonight is to make decisions based on township ordinances, which exist and are enforceable. This is the aspirational, which then we would need sort of an ordinance that calls for that so that we can point to that and make a decision based upon the ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't disagree with it, I certainly believe in the master plan, I just think that's not within the purview of the decision being asked of us.
All I'm asking is that we don't vote on, we can certainly, a waiver or all the other things, but I personally, as a board
Understood, yeah.
member, would like to see what's, more transparency of what's going to be built in its place.
Understood. Okay, so that said, that one item of a waiver request is the building plans. Okay. Should we do the others first and then that second, or that one?
Yeah, I
first,
think the
or
other thing is, perhaps we
or
can ask,
whatever?
I just have a question.
Absolutely.
Like I'm new here.
No,
So if we, at this point, there is a structure on this plot.
Correct.
And if we divide it into two plots, with that house straddling,
we just heard testimony that they're planning to demolish it before dividing.
oh, okay.
Yes. I don't want to
Correct,
confirm if that's your
except for
testimony.
the
Back.
rear wall on the lot line.
I see. Okay, thank you.
That's a good question.
I had a question. In looking at the drawings, it looks like there might be a spring that runs under the property. I think you said that there were no streams, but I'm wondering if there's a spring because there's indication of a drain on Old Short Hills Road in front of the property, and I'm not sure what that's.
Yeah, so that's just a normal road inlet, like a catch basin. There's no indication.
There's nothing under the property that it's.
No, there's no piping or connection from the property.
Other questions from the board? Okay,
I was going to suggest that we ask our engineer as to whether she has any concerns about those waivers that deal with engineering issues, because she and Eileen are the ones that review the applications for completeness.
Yes, and we received your letter, which I believe the one question which we've heard answered was, are you going to demolish it first? I think you had picked up on that, it hadn't been clear,
Right.
we just heard that, but were there any other questions or concerns?
Well, I stated in my report that I have no objection to the applicant's request for an EIS waiver or for not providing any stormwater calculations. There's nothing to, if there's no building footprint, there's no grading shown, it's very difficult to design a stormwater management plan. That will happen if and when the site is developed and we have a building footprints and grading.
And can you clarify at the point when they may want to develop on the site, that would have to come through?
It definitely would have to come through. It would be, it would be a major engineering plan that we would have to get from them.
Okay.
Of course, it would go through all the building department, the zoning, everything. And we have no control over when they're going to do that.
Right.
So, yes, tonight is just the subdivision of the property. So,
Thank you. Okay, so I believe we should separate the waiver
Yes.
requests. Why don't we do all except the building plans first, because I think we have some, potential difference of opinion that I'm hearing and want to make sure we allow for that to be heard. So I will move to approve the waiver request for environmental impact, stormwater, property overlap, the plot plans, the sustainability checklist. Those are all except for the building plans. Did I get, that's 5?
Facilities.
Facilities, thank you. 6. I move to approve the waiver request for those 6 items. Do we have a second? So we would do roll call.
Corey Dillon,
Yes.
Allison Canfield,
Yes.
Michael Cohen,
Yes.
Deborah Nevis,
Yes.
Sujata Shan,
Yes.
Srini Vijay,
Yes.
David Cosgrove,
Yes.
Gaston Halbert,
Yes.
that's all.
Yes. Okay, those 6 waivers are approved. And then there is a waiver proposal for the building plans. The waiver to not provide the building plans at this time. I will move to approve the waiver request. For a second. Srini.
Corey Dillon,
Yes.
Allison Canfield,
No.
Michael Cohen,
No.
Deborah Nevis,
No.
Sujata Shan,
No.
Srini Vijay,
Yes.
David Cosgrove,
No.
Gaston Halbert,
Yes.
that's all.
Yes. Not approved?
Not good.
I'm sorry.
It was not approved. What would you like us to do? What now?
Well, technically then, the application is not complete because the waivers have to be granted by the planning board, not by, the staff. That's why we've gone through this.
Yep. For providing building plans.
That's correct.
No witnesses.
I'm not sure if I could speak, but I'm not sure if I know it's been voted on. But if the applicant were to make a condition of approval that they would construct a certain type of housing style, would that be something that could be voted on or considered?
Could we possibly take a revote if we have different information?
Well, we can certainly, tonight, at the same meeting, we can
Or put a
reconsider.
condition?
We can reconsider the vote on under a different theory. But someone who voted no would have to move to reconsider based upon representations that are made, and then that vote is taken. If the vote is, yes, we can reconsider, then reconsidering is on the table, and now we deal with the issue again.
Okay,
So it's a
so
two-step
somebody who
process.
just voted no would have to make a motion
That's
to
correct.
open it to reconsider.
So Madam Chair, once we've heard all the information, certainly we can, discuss that, because I think you have, the public, you also have an
Yes.
expert or
Right, I'm
someone
just
that-
recapping that we just deemed their
Yeah.
application incomplete.
Right, I'm just
So that
asking
was-
that.
Yeah,
for all of us to hear what the application is, and then for us to relook at that.
okay, so in order to continue forward, do we have to do what you just outlined?
Yes,
Which is,
because we
okay,
don't have a complete application, so
Okay.
we have to cross that threshold first before we can hear the case.
So I have a question related to this. So once if approved and demolition takes place, then the site has, in essence, no historical value. And in that case, can any type of building go on it?
anything that is consistent with our township zoning plan. Correct. Yes.
Okay, but not necessarily consistent with the Beechcroft area.
Unless we make that a condition, which the applicant just indicated willingness that we could.
Okay.
But yes, to answer your question. So in order to proceed, somebody who just voted no would have to make a motion to
To reconsider.
reconsider the case. So absent that, we do not have a complete application.
Well, I think that's correct, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to give the board some legal advice. So I'd like to ask to go into closed session. We have a room full of people here, so we can vacate the room,
That's fine. We can
and
vacate
that's
the room.
okay. And,
Yeah. Can we go to the room at the end of the hall?
I hate to have all these people left.
Yeah, no, can you guys all leave the room? Yeah, we'll not do that.
We're unmuted, so you're all well.
Okay, everyone make sure your mics are back on, please. How do we get that discussion?
We should, we move to come out of closed session, which we did, but we'll do this on the record here so that we can keep things going. Someone moves
Okay,
it.
I move to come back from closed session.
I'll second it.
I think just a roll call.
Corey Miller,
Yes.
Allison Canfield,
Yes.
Michael Cohen.
Yes.
Deborah Nevins.
Yes.
Sujata.
Yes.
Sean. Kenny BJ.
Yes.
David Cosgrove.
Yes.
Gaston Halbert.
Yes.
That's all.
Yes.
Madam Chair, in order to give the board or the applicant the opportunity to explain further an offer that they made, just generally speaking, I would suggest that we take a vote to reconsider the waiver. That doesn't mean to say we are going to change the vote, but to get it back on the table, so to speak. I would suggest we do that first. If that motion is adopted, we can then have the applicant explain what they're willing to do. We can ask questions and so forth, and then we can re-vote on the issue of waiver.
Thank you. Does anyone want to make a motion to reconsider the waiver?
Whoever voted in favor of not granting the waiver.
Whoever voted no would have to
Right,
make a
we have to
motion.
make it, right.
I'll make a motion to reconsider.
Thank you. Second. Deborah Nevins, second. Okay, roll call vote for the whole board.
Corey Miller,
Yes.
Allison Canfield,
Yes.
Michael Cohen.
Yes.
Deborah Nevins.
Yes.
Sujata Sean.
Yes.
Judy BJ.
Yes.
David Cosgrove.
Yes.
Gaston Halbert.
Yes.
That's all.
Yes. Okay, so we welcome you now back to the open application. You made a comment after our vote. The board would love to further explore with you before considering another vote on the waiver request.
Thank you.
Yeah, so in order to ease some concerns as far as the architectural style and what's being proposed, obviously nothing is concrete at this point because it's still in the conceptual phases. But the intent is to meet the character of the neighborhood of Beechcroft. And one particular style that was given is a Nantucket shingle style house. So it's a more traditional house with shingle shakes, siding, usually sweeping roofs or gambrel roofs. So nothing modern or out of character.
Thank you. Nantucket shingles style, is that the
Correct.
proper term? Okay. Does the board have questions for?
Can you tell us a little bit more of what that, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Go
Can you tell
ahead.
us a little bit more about what that is? I mean, I can speculate, obviously, from the words that you used, but maybe you could put a little bit more meat on the bones.
Yeah, so again, it's just a traditional, more older style home. Nothing modern with modern materials, no metals, no vinyl siding. I believe they're actually going to put cedar shakes on the house as far as siding is concerned. Your typical white trim or similar trim. Roofing styles could be different styles. Could be a gambrel roof, or sometimes they have curved components as well. But again, if you drive down Beechcroft, it's very similar to those houses.
Okay. Thank you.
As far as square footage goes, do you know at this point?
I don't know what's being proposed, but maximum building coverage is we'll get to the testimony later, but it could be up to as much as 5,000 square feet on one lot, and sorry, I just lost my place here. 4,100 square feet on the other lot.
And do you know, is it consistent with what's currently in that neighborhood?
Yes, the house sizes are similar to the neighborhood, and as well as the proposed lot areas will be in conformance with the neighborhood as well.
And do you know what that average is of the community?
Building size or
Yeah.
lot areas? I do not know the building. Just general driving and size of the houses.
Great, thanks. Other questions?
Can we ask Graham, you're, sorry about that, are you good with the Nantucket style or like I have no idea, yeah, Nantucket shingles?
I mean, I think that's the style that's being offered by the applicant, and I think that that is a style that can be identified.
Allison,
Yeah,
yeah,
that
you're
was
good?
the point,
Yes.
can be identified.
It can
Was
be
that-
identified as.
Okay,
yes.
but does it agrees with the neighborhood as we wanted, or?
I'm
So
not
per that
versed
definition.
as to what the neighborhood, I think the neighborhood has a variation of a lot of different styles. But again, I agree with Graham that it is an acceptable style for that.
It's identifiable.
Okay, identified.
So I don't know if you've consulted with an architect or, but whether it's the architect who's gonna be designing the Nantucket shingle style house will will be versed in some way in historic design.
Yes, so there is an architect, and I believe, if I recall, I believe he has been on the Historic Preservation Committee at one point in town. But he's very familiar with the town, done many houses on the town, and I know he did one house right on Beechcroft.
Does that mean that he has?
Yes, he has
background
the
in
expertise
historic design?
to design this house, yes. Sorry.
Are you able to disclose if you have an architect, the name?
So it's gonna be Tom Bayo.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay,
I'll have one.
please.
Yes. If the board were willing to, they are willing to reconsider the waiver, and if they condition that waiver on the condition that we have a Nantucket shingle style house, no vinyls and so forth, to effectively incorporate the representations that you made, including the use of the architect, and I want to make sure that that's acceptable. Would you be willing to accept that as a condition if the board approves ultimately the subdivision of this property?
Yeah, I didn't turn around, but I heard it is from my applicant, so yes.
It is.
Okay. That being said, we would move to make a waiver request, but we wouldn't stipulate the conditions at this time. We
No,
wouldn't
you
stipulate that, or you would do it now.
Condition, yeah, we do it now, and then we do it at
And
the end
later.
if we
can.
grant.
Okay.
That's correct.
I don't know if this is the right time to ask this question. There are 2 significant trees on that property, and I'm wondering whether they are going to be included in the consideration of historic design of the site.
I could answer that now if you like. I'm assuming you mean the trees that are on the
In the
front.
front, on the old shore.
Yes, so the intent is to keep all those trees along the frontage.
Okay.
And you're also confirming, and I heard you say that the wall will remain as it stands on the back of the property.
Their rear wall, correct.
Okay. Any final questions? Okay, so if we were to make a motion to approve the waiver request, we may choose to do so with the condition that any future improvements upon the both subdivided lots would conform with the Nantucket shingle style development. To be designed by an architect, as noted.
Correct.
Also the preservation of all.
And the trees.
Yeah, the preservation of all the trees, I think, doesn't have to do with the building. I think that was part of the demolition. Or we would put that in this waiver request
No, I
as
think
well.
we do it as, I think there's gonna be testimony on that.
Yeah, okay,
And
forthcoming,
we
great,
take care
okay.
of that as a regular condition.
So this is just regarding the building
Correct.
waiver.
Right.
Okay, So-
Madam Chair, where does, we do have a consultant or representative to read for the record the historic literature or information. When would that?
they would have that after their witness is done. We've asked questions, the public has asked questions, and then before we're gonna take any action, we would then have the.
Thank you.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the waiver request for building design, building plans with the condition that future lots would be developed with Nantucket shingle style homes and by the architect as described
Yes,
by
Mr.
the
Bayo.
witness,
B-A-I-O.
Mr. Bayo. I will make that waiver request motion. With a second. Second. Deborah.
Corey Miller,
Yes.
Allison Campfield,
Yes.
Michael Cullen,
Yes.
Deborah Nevis,
Yes.
Sujata Shah.
Yes.
Srini Vijay.
Yes.
David Cosgrove,
Yes.
Gaston Halbert,
Yes.
Jeff Zoll.
Yes. Thank you.
Yep, so I'm going to reference what I have on the easel list submitted as part of the application. It's the plan entitled 285 Old Short Hills Road, major subdivision plan with a date of December 27th, 2022. So this is the proposed development. It's a little hard to see on the board, but if you have your plans in front of you, it'll probably be easier.
We're gonna mark that, Mr. Miller, exhibit A1. I know it's
Okay.
been submitted, but just for the record, so we'll keep straight what we're doing here. And just put today's date on, please, 4/19/23, and describe what you plan.
Sure, this is the subdivision plan that was submitted as part of the application, page 2, which includes the proposed subdivision. It shows the existing improvements that are currently on the site. And I'll go in a little more detail on the project, the property, and the proposed improvements. So as stated, this is 285 Old Short Hills Road, also known as Block 2804, Lot 2, located within the R4 Residence District, which has a requirement of 20,000 square feet of area. The property currently as is 72,637 square feet, and that is measured to the center line of the road. As part of this application, we are going to make a dedication to the county for right-of-way purposes. So the new lot area would be 65,250 square feet. The current lot frontage is approximately 290 feet along Old Short Hills Road. Property is surrounded by the R4 zone predominantly, but there is a C or conservation recreation zone that's to the southeast across Old Short Hills Road. Currently, the property consists of a two-story, 4,375 square foot footprint, single-family dwelling. There's an existing gravel horseshoe driveway that has two entrances off of the road, one to the north, one to the south, which we are proposing to maintain as far as curb cuts. And the existing property is in conformance with the bulk standards as far as the principal structure. I believe there is a pre-existing nonconformity with the walls, but that is to remain. Only critical areas on the property are two steep slope areas or two predominant steep slope areas, one to the north property line shaded in gray and one to the south shaded in gray. There's also little pockets here by the driveway, but those are man-made when they were constructed for the driveway itself. Again, that's 1,928 square feet of slopes, which represents about 3% of the lot. The applicant is proposing to remove the existing structure and all structures on the lot with the exception of the rear wall that has been stated to have historic significance. So that is being kept and it actually looks nice and it provides privacy with the neighbor to the west. This is an as-of-right application, which that means it meets all the bulk requirements in the zoning ordinance. And I'll go through it real quick. I'm not going to go through all the components, but it does conform with all the bulk requirements. Proposed lot 2.01, which is the lot to the left, is 35,503 square feet. Again, required by zoning is 20,000 square feet. So this is almost twice as big as what's allowed or required. And then lot 2.02 is the lot to the north with a lot area of just under 30,000 square feet. So 29,747. Again, 1.5 times what's allowed per code. Given the lot area, I mean, technically you could get 3 lots out of this. So the applicant is not proposing to jam a lot of lots or add a lot of lots. They want to fit with the character. And like I mentioned, a lot of the lots, especially to the south, are smaller lots, half acre or less. Both lots will comply with the lot width requirements, the lot depth requirements. We will comply with all the setbacks as far as side yard, front yard, and rear yard setbacks. And if you look at the zoning tabulation, what we give there is the maximum that's allowed without triggering any variances. Again, once plot plans are created, we will show full conformance. Will be submitted to the zoning department for their review and approval. And then it will go to engineering for approvals on grading, steep slopes, and drainage. And
Can I just confirm that I'm understanding that
Sure.
correctly? So these trapezoid and rectangle that we see drawn within the lot is sort of the outermost limit of the developable footprint, but that doesn't account for floor area ratio, like if you were to build up or any, just making sure I'm understanding. Yeah, that's the 1-2 story.
correct,
Or
yeah.
if you were to see.
Yep, so those lines represent the setbacks or the building envelope. So the ones in the front is the front yard setback, the one in the rear is the rear yard setback.
Mhm.
And then on the side ones, there's two of them. So the township ordinance has two setbacks, one for a single story and one for double story height. And that's what those represent.
Great.
So that is your building envelope. Floor area and building coverage is based on the lot area. It's a calculation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Driveway setback, 5 feet is required. Again, the testimony is that the intent is to keep both driveway curb cuts and utilize the same driveways to access both lots separately. Street trees, we're maintaining all the trees that are in the frontage. I don't think there's any trees in the rear that are of significance or of larger that will be coming down either. This whole area in the middle where the building envelope is relatively flat, relatively developed. So we don't expect major changes as far as elevations, as far as raising or lowering the grades. And again, with the steep slopes are mainly outside the building envelope. So we expect minor disturbance of those slopes. And we'll definitely comply with the requirements in the ordinance of 1,000 square feet or less of disturbance in steep slope areas. The board engineer or township engineer had stated requirements for stormwater. We will comply with the stormwater requirements. If it becomes a major development, we will comply with the major development regulations. If it stays as a minor development, we comply with the minor development regulations, but we will comply either way. That's all I have as far as direct testimony. I don't know if there's questions or you'd like me to go through the review letters.
Anybody have any other questions on that testimony? And yes, it would be great to go through the letters.
So I'm going to start with the police department letter dated February 14th of this year. There's no concern from the police department. Next one is a memorandum from the fire marshal dated February 10th, 2023. Let's see here. They do make a recommendation or suggest that a sprinkler system be constructed for the dwelling. At this point, that's not being proposed. We will comply with whatever applicable regulations and comply with the fire code. The next memorandum is from the township engineer dated February 10th, 2023. I'm just going to skip, I guess, to the ones that are relevant, or you want me to go through line by line?
Just irrelevant.
Okay. So there's first two pages, or first page and first two comments are statement of facts. First comment is comment 2.3 regarding there's a minor discrepancy between the legal description and the meets and bounds on the survey. So speaking with the surveyor, the differences are 1/100th of a foot and a minute of a degree. So the reason for that is because when he was putting together the boundary, there was an opening. So the boundary didn't close. So typically when a surveyor comes in, he tries to make that closure. And that's what was done here, and it has no effect on the neighboring properties. It only has an effect on our property. So that's the difference, and we will memorialize that as far as the deed descriptions for each lot. 2.4, I believe I testified to, we will comply with the township ordinance regarding stormwater, whether it's a minor or major development. 2.5, we will comply with submitting to Hudson Essex Passaic Soil Conservation District. 2.6, we will comply with the steep slope disturbance requirement in the ordinance of 1,000 square feet or less. 2.7, I believe is a statement of fact that we will need tree removal permits if we are to remove any trees from the township forester. 2.8 is a reference to obtaining curb cuts or road openings from the county, which we will do if one is still required for keeping the same cuts. And I'm just going to go through the next four that we will comply with: 2.9, 2.10, 2.11, and 2.12. Last report that there's two more reports. We have the planner's report dated February 10th, 2023 as well. may paraphrase, I know there's a zoning table, but the zoning table lists variances, because I think there was confusion as far as the house staying or not staying. The house is being demolished, but there is a note saying that if the house is being demolished, that all the variances do come off. Just make sure there's nothing that I'm missing here. We will forward any county planning board approval to the township professionals. We will record the subdivision by map, since it's a major subdivision instead of deeds. We will comply with the residential development fee. We testified to 2 regarding the proposal of 2 single-family dwellings, and we also testified to the character and architectural style. 3, the applicant will comply with the curbing requirements of section 506. I believe both driveways actually do have granite block curbing already on either side. 4, I testified as well. We are proposing to maintain the existing curb cuts. And 5, we have no issues, but we'll comply with identifying the variances and or side yards per the planner's tabulations.
Okay, can you confirm regarding, you just mentioned the tree removal and talked about would comply with forester, but can you just restate for the record your testimony on the trees on the property?
Sure. So the intent is to keep the trees along the frontage along Old Short Hills Road. I know there's 2 large trees to the south, and I believe there's 1 to the north. And then there's a lot of smaller trees. I don't know if they're 2 or 2.5 inch diameter trees. But
For those 3 larger ones?
yeah, the intent is to keep that frontage as is. The only caveat is obviously if the county comes back and says it's a site easement issue or something to that effect, then we would have to comply with their requirements.
Understood. Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have questions for Mr. Manlio? Okay, do any members of the public have questions for Mr. Manlio based on his testimony? And if so, you could come up at this time. The microphone.
Okay. Hi, how are you? My name is Christine Best. Do I need to tell you where I live or no?
You can.
Okay, I live close to that house. It's right at the entrance to my neighborhood. I live in Fairfield Estates on 15 Fairfield Terrace. And it's a beautiful house. And so I'm actually here because I just wanted to understand the subdivision because I actually lived next to a subdivision that really impacted me. So I just wanted to see how this is done. It sounds awesome in a lot of ways. And I just had some questions. And you were actually really nice and helped me with a good majority of them. Some of the questions I wanted to understand in terms of steep slope, there's already water issues on Beechcroft. I think it's Beechcroft or South Beechcroft Road below that estate. I know that because I almost purchased a house on Beechcroft and I didn't because they had 2 feet of water during Hurricane Floyd. So there's already a lot of runoff issues for those 3 properties. And I think that maybe that's something for you to consider. So maybe you could address that. Should I tell you all my questions first or would you like to answer one by one?
Depends how good my memory is.
No, I just don't want
Just a
to be
couple.
annoying. So
No,
which is easier for you?
Either way.
Why don't you answer that question?
Okay.
Yeah, let's go one by one. Thanks.
Yeah, so as far as stormwater impacts to neighbors, so if anything, I believe this improvement will actually improve the stormwater onto offsite. So right now, there's no stormwater detention, no dry wells on the property that's controlling the runoff. With this new development, we will be required to put stormwater in, so dry well systems for each lot. And if this is a major development, there's actually a reduction that has to be done as well on top of what is existing.
Excuse me one second, I just have a list of things, might not be that many more. I am concerned, is there, I know that they did do the waiver and you talked about the architectural style as being Nantucket shingle. As an ex-designer, Nantucket shingle is kind of a really big term and can turn out in lots of different ways depending on how you spin it. There's like the Hamptons, Southampton, Nantucket shingle. There's the Cape Cod with the ample roof. And you can change a lot of things architecturally just through the window trim design, et cetera. And also the landscaping play, the way it's situated into the landscape. So I do think it's kind of important to get into more detail about that, particularly without drawings. I'm actually surprised. So just wanted to ask, maybe you could elaborate on what you mean by Nantucket shingle.
Yeah, so as of at this point, we don't have a definitive of what type of Nantucket shingle. We're trying to give a general sense of what type of house would be built there. My understanding or my, I guess, feeling from the board was they just wanted to get a sense that, it's not something that's going to be out of character with the lot. I think any of those types of Nantucket shingles would fit that neighborhood.
What's the house number that the architect, or was it you were talking about that the builder, your client, built on in the Beechcroft neighborhood? I just was wondering, because there are some non-conforming houses in terms of aesthetics in that neighborhood.
I don't know the address, but I know what it looks like because
Oh, that'd be great.
I drove
I know
by
what
today
house
and I
is.
did a double take. And when I met with the architect, he was like, "Oh, I did that house." So it's the house. It's a gray house, and it has almost like a bridge that goes over the driveway. So there's a main portion of the house, and it's actually. He was explaining to me that the current house has 7-foot ceilings and the new addition has 10-foot ceilings. And it's actually on the tour for June 2nd if you want to do the architectural tour. And then you cross the bridge, on the other side is, I don't remember what's on the first floor, but on the second floor, but the first floor is a garage.
Oh yeah, that's actually a nice house, a little bit oversized, but, and that does back up to the property that you were talking about this evening.
I believe so, yes.
In terms of the wall, that, that is a historic wall, I think Deborah talked about it in the commission meeting. If there's any damage to the wall during construction, is the intent to reconstruct portions of it in the event that it gets damaged? Because it is an extremely beautiful wall and historic piece, and in the same materials, so it's consistent.
Yeah, I don't think we have an issue making that a condition. No construction should occur by the wall. The building envelope is way into the site. And we'll obviously put silt fence and limited disturbance over there so they don't go past that limit.
To make sure I understood that, just to clarify, I'm sorry to interrupt your questioning, but you would be willing to include a contingency that you would retain the wall, and if any disruption or just damage happened, you would replace it, in kind with consistent material.
Yes, I'm just trying to think if it's an act of God or something happens, if that's still a condition, or like an earthquake.
Sure.
If it's caused by the.
We're not setting it now, I just wanted to make sure.
If it's
I
caused
heard
by
you correctly.
construction, we could agree to
Sure, if it's a construction damage, thank you. Do you have further questions?
Give me one, I'm sorry,
No,
I was trying to separate my questions, because you said questions and statements, so I'm trying to just comply
Thank
with
you.
that. In terms of the tree staying, which I think is a great point Deborah brought up, there's stunning trees, and it's really important to the heritage of the area, particularly because it abuts conservation of Greenwood Gardens and Fort Hills Park. I wanted to understand, that there's not going to be construction vehicles rolling over that. There's going to be extreme effort to protect those trees, because in the event something happened like that, inadvertently, then those trees are gone. And I know that's really important to the commission.
Yes, we don't have an issue making that a condition. And I think what we could do is we can even put the construction entrance to the north to avoid any damage to the trees to the south.
Are there any laws around conservation zones being in that proximity that the township needs to be aware of? I'm not familiar with them. I'm aware of Massachusetts laws, but not New Jersey.
Yeah, so not that I'm aware of, I'm aware that we have to comply with the zoning that the property is located within.
And, the other thing, and I don't know if this is really a question or concern, but so correct me if I overstate. Is the intent to only have 2 subdivisions, or is there a possibility that there could be a third added?
So the intent is to have 2 lots.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, no, that's fine, 2 lots. As far as a further subdivision, I don't believe that's possible without a variance at this point.
So it could happen if you apply for variance.
Well, they would have to knock down the houses and come back for a variance or a different application. But
Right.
the intent
right,
is,
But it could happen.
if it's under same ownership, yes, it's possible.
And I think I just have one more. So there weren't any, there was no, and I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to look at the drawings, and I know there's some historic, looks like some landscape work done with some stone, like recessed areas, which gives a lot of character to the house. And it would be great if they did some consideration, particularly on the frontage, to maybe add some type of aesthetic And would you be willing to do that where you have a continuation of the wall or that design element in the front of the house so that when people look at it historically, like it retains some of the elegance of the property? It's a very elegant property. I hope everybody in this community's reviewed it.
So I might be a little confused on the
Yeah.
walls or landscape walls that were.
So like, because of all those stone walls, it has an estate-like quality to it, and there's a lot of openings, it's very stunning, almost in the same aesthetic as Old Short Hills Park has. And so what I was saying is, because, you do have that sort of rolling, circular driveway and the big estate, even though it's run down right now, it's very, very charming. How are you going, like, I'm just trying to think, like, just kind of pop into driveways and, have two houses and plop in a row of like arborvitae, which seems to be kind of the thing these days in a lot of, I'm not saying that this will happen in this situation. I don't think you're gonna retain the character of the space. So I think if you maybe consider doing some kind of step terracing in the front, with some landscaping with that wall aesthetic, it might actually look even more beautiful. Just that it might, make everybody happy, you get your subdivision and, it would also just retain the historical aspect of the space from an aesthetic visual.
So yeah, I don't know if we could make that a condition of approval. Again, we're not sure what the final style of the house is, the shape of it, location of it. Driving by the house, you really can't see the landscape. I'm not sure if this is the landscape area that you were talking about.
Yeah, it's just a suggestion. I'm not the one making the decision. But then the last thing I wanted to ask is, I didn't really have an understanding of what your intention is for lot coverage and for impervious lot coverage in terms of like patios, pools, et cetera, because that would affect drainage and, the overall coverage of the space.
Yep, that's a good question. So on our tabulation, we show what's the max allowed without a variance.
Okay.
So the applicant will have to comply with a number that's under that max allowed. And again, the stormwater, the way the regulations are written in the township ordinance and in the state regulations is you have to base it on the amount of impervious and different coverages on the site.
Right, no, I understand. I just thought, based on Ms. Canfield's comments, I thought that was an important issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions for this witness? Okay. I will turn it back to you.
We have no further.
You have no further questions. Okay, so we as the board have, well, I have to do two things. We have both, someone from the historical commission is here and available to answer questions on that report.
Correct.
And we also would have to allow the public to make comments.
That is good.
We will do the discussion first.
Yes.
At this point, I believe somebody is present from the Historical Preservation Commission.
Madam Chair, if I can introduce,
That'd be great.
Zach Davis, co-chair of the HPC, which is standing in for Barton Ross, who could not make it this evening. So if you could just, for the record, read the recommendations and what the Historic Preservation Commission came up with on this particular property. I think it's important for the public to hear the historic relevance of this particular property. So
Thank you. Sir, can you state your name?
Sure.
And address for the record and position?
Sure. My name is Zachary Davis. I currently serve as the co-chair or vice chair of the Millburn Historic Preservation Commission. I live at 210 White Oak Ridge Road here in town. And I'm here to represent the opinion that was presented by Barton Ross, who's our outside consultant to the Historic Preservation Commission on the history of this property. As the board is aware, this property at 285 Old Short Hills Road is identified in the historic preservation element of the master plan, which.
Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm going to ask Eric to swear you in. I recognize, and the board should recognize, that the testimony that is being given is largely a reiteration of what is in there. It's not your testimony per se, but to the extent that you may sprinkle in your own comments.
Of course I will. So.
I just assume have you sworn in this way, then we cover it. So, Eric, if you could do the honors.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony about to give in tonight's proceeding be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Can you just state your name again for the record?
Zachary Davis.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Sorry to
Sure.
interrupt you.
No worries. Like I said, I just wanted to enter into the record the information that Barton Ross has provided to the board about the history of this property. If hopefully you've read through it, it's a pretty substantial document, and I hope for the developers that they also appreciate the history that is represented here by this property. You're looking at a history that may stretch back to the 1830s, so even before Millburn was developed as a town. So there is a real history to this property. It is being brought to you as an advisory position. We do not actually have authority to tell you what to do. We can only recommend to you what to do. So that is our role here. And so I appreciate you giving me a few minutes to express the findings of this report. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but what I think is important to understand is are the recommendations and the conclusions of this report. And I think that Ms. Canfield has expressed some of the concerns that Barton Ross has brought up in this report that we would like to see taken into consideration as this application has been, well, I guess it's been deemed complete at this point, but you are still considering elements and potentially any promises or guarantees that may actually be put on the application as it moves forward. So I'm going to read Barton's findings and recommendations here because this really gets to the heart of our role here as the Historic Preservation Commission as it relates to the Planning Board. As I mentioned before, we do have this. We do have this is the. We have the historic preservation element of the master plan. And within that plan, there are several goals that Ms. Canfield had mentioned before. In Barton's conclusion, he references some of these goals. A major goal of historic preservation and a preservation-minded municipality is to protect and preserve the architectural heritage and local history of the town by ensuring that any new development maintains the character, scale, and feel of the historic buildings that define that neighborhood. That's kind of what we're talking about when we think, how can this new development potentially reflect what could be going in there? But there's also the consideration to not allow for subdivisions of large parcels because you're losing part of the character of the town when you actually subdivide those properties. So the challenge for the applicants is to understand this important architectural consideration and figure out how to maintain the integrity of that character by retaining historic features on the site, exploring alternatives to subdivision, and revised site and architectural design. Now, as the woman mentioned before, talking about the walls, trying to incorporate the wall elements into the actual design of the building or the two proposed buildings. I think that's something to consider. Are there ways that you can retain material from the existing building or to incorporate the wall that exists into the design of the building? Those are the things that I think we should be considering as you look to approve this application. I also want to mention that here in Barton's report, he talks about the master plan considerations. One of the major goals of Millburn's 2018 master plan reexamination report is to protect the character of established neighborhoods. This was also the top key issue identified in the community outreach survey process. Residents responded, quote, "The people, tree-lined streets, local architecture, and Millburn's small town feel were also cited as qualities that responders love best about their neighborhood and were considered among Millburn's greatest assets," end quote. And that should include 285 Old Short Hills Road and the surrounding area. So again, those are things I think you should be considering as you look at this application. The survey raised concerns that new development and alterations to existing homes are out of character with the existing neighborhood context, and which would include this development proposal. And said the master plan encourages, quote, "appropriate land use that promote the character of the township as a small suburb of the highest quality," end quote. Again, things to consider. In summary, the applicants should be showing architectural drawings, which we've talked about a little bit. We have a little bit of understanding now as to what they're proposing, and 3D renderings for the proposed houses so that you board could understand if subdivision will be a positive outcome and whether the proposed project would actually be consistent with the town's master plan. So I think that pretty much summarizes what Barton Mr. Ross is expressing in this report. And, that's really what I wanted to bring to your attention. If you're not familiar with the goals and objectives of the master plan, I do have them here. So if anybody would like them to review, but that's really what we have to present. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Does anybody have questions for Mr. Davis?
Madam Chair, I'd like to also state that the history of this house and visiting this house, that the property was not salvageable based on the condition and the multiple additions put onto it. So the Historic Commission has said that the house really had no historic significance anymore, but keep in mind that the property once, if there's any neighbors here, once covered 21 acres. So it's been subdivided. But this particular property also has a name, Beechcroft, and we're asking the applicants, and I believe that they will take that into consideration in the history and what this property meant to this town. So, thank you.
Thank you, absolutely. And I appreciate you calling out some of the specifics. I think the applicant, I appreciate their retaining the wall and committing to, maintaining it through construction as well as the trees on site, which I think is consistent with what Mr. Ross is proposing. So thank you for the
Thank you.
time. Okay. At this point, we would open it up to any comments from members of the public. So just providing any testimony or statements that you may have or no one may have. Okay. So we'd come have you sworn in and you can make your statement and then.
Oh, you want me to swear?
Yeah, come on up.
Thank you. I'm just here
No,
with
you
pink
can stand right
pants.
there.
Okay,
Just raise
thank
your right
you.
hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in tonight's proceeding be the truth, the whole truth, and but the truth?
It's my opinion, and it is my truthful opinion of myself, yes.
Okay. Just wait. Just state your name and your address for the record.
Christine Best, 15 Fairfield Terrace, Short Hills,
Just spell your last name.
BEST.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let me just pull up my thing. So, one of the things that I going back to the historical comments that are made that I think is really important about Short Hills that people forget about, particularly people that haven't lived here as long. I mean, I've been here for 27 years. I went to high school in Summit. I have tons of friends from here. I went up and down the train tracks from Burnersville down to all the way to Newark all the time. And I've been in this area for a long time. And it's a beautiful town. And bit by bit over the years, I've seen a chopping up of estates, a lot of estates, including the one next to me. It was a major subdivision. And one of the things that I'm also very concerned about is Old Short Hills Park is sort of on the docket right now for a possibility of putting fields in and bright lighting, which is something that you guys should know about actually when you're considering purchasing that house because it actually
Wait, I
might
can't
devalue
hear
the
you.
property. Oh, I'm sorry, it might devalue the property. I think it's going to significantly devalue the property in the Beechcroft area, as well as in the area I live in, Fairfield Estates. So I'm all down for development of that property, 100%, but I think it needs to be done right and with a lot of consideration. And I'm very disappointed that people do not understand or have respect for visual design because I think it's really important that somebody comes to the table. It's just my opinion with plans that are very easily readable for people that are lay people. So they need to be colored and rendered in 3D. And I don't know what the going price is. I've done a couple of constructions on my house, but it's not that much money in the scheme of the profitability of this project. And I'm very disappointed that that was not available today because I think it would be very easy for you to all vote on it, particularly in the comments that came from, Deborah and Allison. So that's my biggest issue that I'm concerned about. And then also water. I actually do think that when you change the impervious coverage to a great extent, like I don't know what the current square footage of that house currently is. Maybe it looks like it's ballpark 6,000 or maybe 5,500, I'm not sure. So let's say they go to 9,000 or 10,000. So you're doubling the coverage. And yes, you can put in drainage pits. It does work to a certain extent, but you take trees down, it changes. I saw it myself on my own property and they already have flooding issues. If you actually go talk to those 3 people that live on the south side, I think it would be the south side of the property. They have major flooding issues on those unless they've done new drainage work. So I just think it's really important to see all the details, and details matter in design. You build from the ground up. The color matters. The quality, when you deal with an estate property, the quality of the materials matter. It's not just the design. And again, I stress on the Nantucket shingle. That's so vague. I mean, it's like everything's a Nantucket shingle, like when you go to Cape Cod. I grew up in Cape Cod. So I hope that, it's just more finely considered than this, and I support development in this town just responsibly. And I think your house is very beautiful by the way that you designed in the estate area. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Okay. We as a board can discuss any of the conditions we heard. We may want to re-summarize, and anything else that we may want to just make sure we capture before taking a vote on this application. I heard two, in addition to the Nantucket shingles style home, I heard the condition of maintaining or replacing in kind any construction damage that might happen to the rear retaining wall on site, and maintaining the trees. I heard 3 large trees, 2 at the front and 1 at the north side, 1 along the side, with the construction entrance to be designated along the north side of the property to avoid those existing trees. Do we have any other conditions that we are considering? Council, did you capture any that I'm not getting there?
We talked about the trees.
Uh-huh.
We talked about the
Wall.
wall, the Nantucket shingles. And I guess in general, that it would, that the design would be consistent with the Beechcraft area.
The Beechcraft area, okay.
That the architect was.
Yes,
And the architect
would be
is
Tom
Mr. Bass.
Bayo.
Yes.
Someone with historic knowledge.
I don't think it has to be him, I think, or somebody with historic knowledge, I think
Okay.
is appropriate. Yeah, should that have to change, I don't want that to have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the forester to be consulted, is that, so that the trees, because I know when properties are worked on, oftentimes they will fence off significant trees so that, construction vehicles, even though I know they're entering from.
I want to ask Martha, Martha, can you confirm, is the forester consulted in terms of if they need to, during construction, rope or demarcate any of the trees or protect them?
The plan that comes into the engineering department is reviewed by the township forester as well. So we both see the site grading, and he makes comments if he wants to save a particular tree, or she, Stacy, our new township forester, if she wants to save a particular tree and they've located a dry well adjacent to it, she'll make them move it. So they do have input into the plan. And they will, if there's a particular specimen tree that's in good condition, they'll fight to save those, any kind of thing like that. But they do have a thorough review of the plan that comes in.
And also, so the architect is gonna have historic,
Just make sure you're getting picked up.
yes,
Yep.
oh, sorry. So the architect is gonna have experience with historic design. Is it possible for the architect to consult with the HPC or a member of the HPC, or, is that a possibility?
I guess we would ask the applicant if they would be open to sharing the plans with the HPC.
No, this is an application as of right, no variances. There's a lot of conditions already. Thank you.
Can't have that.
Yeah. Any further? No. Any other questions? Just want to make sure everybody had an opportunity.
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
I'm certainly working with the builder in a prior historic home. I'd like to take some reassurance that I know they will do the right thing for this property, and hope that every bit of the history of this property is considered. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay. with conditions as set forth in this discussion, the trees, the retaining wall, and the architectural design as we described in detail. I make a motion to approve this application.
Second.
Is that you, Corey?
Yes, sir.
Corey Diller,
Yes.
Allison Canfield,
Yes.
Michael Cohen,
Yes.
Deborah Nevis,
Yes.
Sujata Shan,
Yes.
Srini Vijay,
Yes.
David Cosgrove,
Yes.
Gaston Halbert,
Yes.
Beth Sol.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you
Patience
very much.
Can I add? Drove around that house multiple times. I went with my children. Thank you for keeping the wall. I think it's gonna be great. Yeah.
Beautiful, it is.
We need to call back Mayor Miggins. Someone, one of you who are closer to just I can grab her. And why don't we take a 3-minute break so we can start in 5 minutes? I know how this works. Anybody Order of business, I've now fully lost my agenda, I'm sorry. Application 22003, Annie Milburn Partners LLC. This is for preliminary and final major site plan approval. Welcome, Mr. Liscan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, let me say publicly, it's nice to meet you in person and the board. We had an application a few years ago and we were all in virtual land, so it's nice to be in person. Good evening, Madam Chair, Mayor, members of the board, board professionals, and the public. My name is John Inglesino. I'm a partner with the law firm of Inglesino Taylor, located in Parsippany. We represent the applicant, Annie Milburn Partners LLC. We are before this board seeking preliminary and final major site plan approval with respect to property located at 249 Milburn Avenue, and more particularly referred to as Lot 1 in Block 705 on the official tax map of Milburn Township. The site is commonly known as the Annie Says site in town. It's located within the township's residential multifamily affordable housing district, also known as the RMF AH4 zone. Specifically, the applicant seeks approval to permit the construction of an inclusionary 149-unit apartment building, together with related site improvements and amenities on the property, together with such things such as attached garage, lighting, landscaping, dog run, stormwater facilities, and the like. The applicant's plan also calls for installation of certain improvements on the adjacent property known as 225 Milburn Avenue, and more particularly known as Lot 2 in Block 705. And some of the improvements on that property would be a doghouse, manhole for sewer conveyance, and a gate at the existing fence. The project also provides for a 20% set aside for affordable housing units. This application is being made in furtherance of a settlement agreement entered into between the Township of Milburn and Fair Share Housing Center dated July 30th, 2021, which agreement was executed by Milburn Township on August 17th. The applicant, then known as 249 Milburn Avenue LLC, is also a party to that settlement agreement. I would like to introduce the resolution authorizing Milburn's execution of the settlement agreement into the record as Exhibit A1. I think that was just passed around. And we respectfully submit the settlement agreement to be part of the record for this application and request it be marked as A2. I have the official exhibits there. Section 7 of the settlement agreement provides, and I quote, that the township shall provide a realistic opportunity for the development of affordable housing on the following sites. And if you go to Section D, it says 249 Milburn Avenue LLC, Annie Says Block 705 Lot 1, which is this property. The settlement evidences Milburn's agreement for the project, which is the subject of this application. In the settlement agreement, the Township of Milburn agreed that the property which is subject to this application is, quote, suitable, available, developable, and approvable as those terms are defined in COA's rules set forth at NJAC 5:93-1.3. The settlement agreement also notes that Milburn had, as far back as its 2018 master plan reexamination, identified the subject property as a redevelopment opportunity and suggested that it be rezoned for multifamily housing because of its location in the downtown and close proximity to the Milburn train station. The applicant has received the following reports from Milburn in connection with this application. One was a completeness determination dated January 30th from Ms. Davitt. Police report dated February 27th of 2023. Fire department report dated February 27th of 2023. Milburn Environmental Commission email dated February 17th of 2023. Milburn's Forester's report dated February 24 of 2023. Milburn Engineering report dated March 8th, 2023, and board planning report dated March 10th of 2023. On behalf of our client, my office responded to all of these reports by an omnibus letter dated April 7th of 2023. The settlement agreement includes a concept plan, which substantially reflects the development before you this evening. However, the settlement agreement acknowledges that the concept plan may be modified in the applicant's sole discretion during the site plan preparation process. The settlement agreement further provides that the project shall provide for a 20% set aside for affordable housing, and as I indicated, the application fulfills that requirement. Pursuant to the settlement agreement, the Township of Millburn adopted the ordinance which permits this project as an as-of-right use. That ordinance, which is ordinance number 2593-21, was introduced on October 19 of 2021 and duly adopted by the Millburn governing body on November 9 of 2021. We are not seeking any variance from the ordinance, and as such, again, this is an as-of-right application. We have 5 witnesses. We're going to hear from one this evening. We have our project engineer, John Giacinto of Langen Engineering, who we will hear from this evening. Our traffic engineer is Carl Pankey of Langen Engineering, who you will not hear from this evening. Our project architect is Jack Raker of Minnow Wasco. Our landscape architect is Jason Trunco of Molo and Bauer. And if necessary, Jonathan Schwartz, who is the manager of the applicant, will be available to answer any questions that you may have with regard to the operations of the project. So with that having been said, Madam Chair, I'll call my first witness, Mr. DiGiacinto.
Okay.
Madam Chair, would you like him to pre-mark his exhibits, or would you like him
I'd
to?
like him to be sworn in first. and
Yes, we'll do that, but
Yes.
if you, okay, so after he's sworn in, we can.
We can mark the exhibits as we go through them.
Yeah,
but
okay.
I think let's go one by one. I think it's okay.
That's fine, just wanted your preference.
You just want me to run back and forth, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in tonight's proceeding to be the truth, whole truth, and but the truth?
I do.
Your name for the record, spelling your name, please.
John DiGiacinto, D-I, capital G-I-A-C-I-N-T-O.
Mr. DiGiacinto, can you please, I'm sorry, you just spelled your name, were you sworn yet?
Yes, he's sworn.
Qualification piece?
Yes, can you please provide the board with your
Sure.
qualifications and educational background, and please reference any licenses that you possess.
Yep. Graduate of Lehigh University with a Bachelor's of Civil Engineering in 1994. Been working at Langen since 1998. Licensed in the state of New Jersey since 1999. My license is active. And I've been testifying since 2000, most recently Mountain Lakes, Newark, South Orange, Sayreville, all over New Jersey.
So, Madam Chair, we respectfully request that the board recognize Mr. DiGiacinto as an expert in the area of civil engineering.
Civil engineering, we will hear you as such. Thank you.
Thank you much. Can you please describe the existing conditions of the site?
Sure. I'm going to start by
Marking
setting up the
exhibit
exhibit.
A3 then?
Yep.
Okay. Is this, can you just read the title of it, or if the number, if it's something we already have? Thanks.
It is not something that we set. So this is, drawing number is called Exhibit 1.
Great.
It will be Exhibit A3 for your list. Title is an aerial, and it's an aerial showing the vicinity of the project.
Great. Is it dated?
There is a date, April 19th, 2023.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Better for me to talk here than
Yeah,
there?
better in the mic.
Okay,
Thank
keep
you
your
so
voice
much.
up too. Tell me
I
if
know
I'm
we're
being
making
too
it a
quiet.
challenge here. It's okay.
Okay, so the site is essentially dead center. I'm going to run back, point it out real quick. Existing site is approximately 2.22 acres, and as was mentioned, block 705, lot 1, currently occupied by a one-story commercial building on the south side and parking lot on the north side. Again, the property is located in the Residential Multifamily Affordable Housing District, RMFAH4, via the settlement agreement that Mr. Inglesino mentioned previously. As you can see, the property is bound by the railroad line to the north, an existing commercial building to the east, Milburn Avenue, which is a county road to the south, as well as some residential and commercial properties across the street, and Essex Street, which again is a county road on the west, and the commercial property, which I believe is the PNC Bank on the west side. Along Milburn Avenue frontage, there is an existing 5.5-foot wide sidewalk that is abutted up against the curb line. There are 4 street trees along there. Those street trees are set back behind the sidewalk, almost on the existing property line, right-of-way line. There are utility poles with overhead wires, a hydrant, and signage along the curb line in the sidewalk. Essex Avenue has an approximate 4-foot wide sidewalk in front of the site. That is set back about 3 feet from the curb line. There's one existing tree, several signs, and a couple of utility poles there. There are 2 existing curb cuts, driveway aprons into the site. One is just north of the building, and one is at the very northwest corner. I'll point them out real quick. There's the one just north of the building, this one northwest of the building, or in the northwest corner. Both of those aprons service the existing driveway and parking lot behind the building. The
Can
existing.
I ask a clarification question?
Sure.
Many of us know the property, the curb cut to the east of the building, is that off property?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Forgot about that because we're getting rid of it. There is a third curb cut on Milburn Avenue just to
Yes.
the east side of the property.
thank you.
Thank you for catching that.
Sure.
The existing property currently contains just shy of 2 acres of impervious surface. As you can see, there's not very much green except in the front. That equates to about 89.2% impervious coverage. Of that 1.9 acres, the building itself is about 0.69 acres. The rest is the asphalt parking lot, concrete walkways, and sidewalks. Existing stormwater runoff is captured in the parking lot behind the building, conveyed to the east. There's a conveyance system that runs along the entire east side of the property. That actually collects water from the railroad as well as the site, conveys it around the property into an inlet on Milburn Avenue. I'll get more into that when I talk about the stormwater. The very northwestern driveway curb ramp on Essex actually also provides access to the transit property. There's currently gravel in that area that allows for access through the property into the transit property. I'm going to mark the site plan, CS 101, dated 29 July 2022, last revised February 17th, 2023, which is part of the submission package as A4.
What was the second date? I'm sorry.
Last revised February 17th, 2023.
Thank you.
Again, this is the site plan drawing CS 101 that was included in the most recent application package. So here we have the proposed building. Proposed improvements include the 149-unit, 4-story residential building. Within the lower portion, you can see the white area that's sort of inside the donut of the building. That is a 6,000 square foot courtyard internal to the building. In the northeast portion, there is a 324 space, 5-story parking garage. The total footprint of the building and the parking garage is just over 70,000 square feet, which equates to about 1.61 acres. The proposed driveway, or the proposed entrances to the site will be 2 driveways off of Essex Street. The lower southern driveway is an ingress-only driveway that will be used for drop-off, as well as circulation to the loading dock, which I'll describe. The northern access point will be a two-way driveway exit, entry exit from the site and access into the parking deck. As mentioned, the existing third curb cut on Milburn Avenue is being removed and replaced with full-height curb.
I'm sorry, say that again, replaced with what?
A full-height curb, essentially removing the vehicular access from Milburn Avenue. Along the northern side of the entry-exit driveway, which I will point out real quick. This is the northern ingress egress driveway. This is the area I'm speaking now, just north of that. That will be a loading area. It's going to be used for move in, move out, deliveries, as well as trash removal. The project will include new utilities, sanitary sewer, water main, electric, gas, stormwater conveyance. There will be new street lighting along Milburn Avenue and Essex Street, as well as internal to the site. There's a new fenced-in dog park located on the east side of the site. That's actually this area here, along the southern portion of the garage between the two properties.
Mr. DeGiuseppe, while you're over there,
Sure.
if I could ask you to clarify just for me, can you go over the driveways again? One is an ingress, but then how do you exit if you come in there? And then
So-
are you all at the same level? Can you just clarify?
Essentially, yes, you're all at the same level at grade. This driveway, again, provides entrance only. This is going to be a drop-off area.
Okay,
And then you would circulate to this northern driveway, which provides ingress and egress. You can turn out, also access the loading area. This allows trucks to come into the site, circulate into the loading area without having to go down Essex and back in, and prevents them from having to pull into Essex to get into this space. So it provides some circulation benefits for the move in, move out, garbage, as well as deliveries. And then you have the entrance and exit here. The entrance will take you into the garage, and then obviously you have the same exit here.
great. And it looks like there's a white vertical bar that would, that's why I was asking about at grade. No, to the right a bit more, the,
Oh, this.
yes,
So that'll get explained in the architecture, but there's a separation between the garage and the actual residential piece in here.
okay. But the cars would continue through.
Yeah, cars continue straight
Thank
through.
you.
There is just a brief opening.
Where would the gate be?
There's going to be a gate for the garage internal to the garage itself, about 130 feet back from the street. And that'll be on the east side of that white bar.
And I'm sure we'll get into more detailed plans on that, but thank you. I think we have a few questions now.
The garage is only for the building residents, it's not a public garage?
Correct.
So presumably the dog park then is also for the residents?
Correct. Yeah, it's a rather small dog park, so I don't think it would work well for a public atmosphere.
What's the size of it?
I believe it's about 5,000 square feet. I don't have the exact number on here. It's actually only about 1,000 to 1,200 square feet.
I can ask one more question, please? You said there was 324 parking spaces
Correct.
and that covered 1.61 acres just for the parking?
No, that's the building and the parking. Everything you see within this dark bold building outline, which is this, the main building here, and this western residential wing, so this is all the residential piece. This is the parking garage.
And 324 spaces. I'm just curious, when we approved this, it was 1.3 per unit. So 149 units times 1.3 is equal to how many parking spots?
I'm gonna get to that in a couple minutes when I go through the bulk requirements, if you wanna.
But I'll do some math in the
Yeah.
meantime.
Yeah,
Oh, I have the number here.
I'd like to,
So-
please, thank you.
You want it right now?
Yes, please.
Okay.
If you could.
Yeah, no, I have it. Just a few pages down the path. 1.3 for 149 units is 194 spaces.
And how many are you asking for?
324. Changes the ratio of 1.3 to about 2.17.
Seems awfully high.
And further questions?
You
Can I keep
continue
going?
your-
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
No, thank you.
No, I see one more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
A hand.
I don't know if this will get addressed, but so I'm looking at the egress driveway and that's where trash collection, move in, move out, deliveries, plus any cars that are exiting are gonna be all in that area there?
Yes.
That's the only egress.
Correct.
From here, it looks narrow, so I'm just wondering if we've got somebody moving in, there's a delivery, and people need to leave, how that's,
So operationally, there'll be some testimony towards that. That's not my area of expertise.
okay,
But what we've been told, or what the team has discussed, trash will be very early in the morning. I don't know the exact hours, but it's private hauler. The,
I have to ask members of the audience not to comment, sorry, thank you.
move-ins, move-outs are scheduled with the ownership so that they don't occur, they occur at the proper hours that they know that will work best for the facility. Again, that is also intended to be used for deliveries such as Amazon, UPS, things like that. In the event that there's actually the move-in happening at that time, obviously they could stop quickly in the front driveway, the drop-off area, run out, drop off their packages. Both the drop-off area and the main driveway are 24-foot wide aisles. So you have, two 12-foot aisles in, one out on the main egress driveway, but you also have that width so that if there's a car stop, do we drop off, or the chance that an Amazon has to step there because something's happening in the loading area, a car can still get by there. So just a couple more things on the proposed conditions. There was the mention about the fencing on the adjacent property. There's going to be an emergency access provided a little bit north of Midway. And this is an access into the site from this parking lot, which was requested by the fire department. So the existing gate will be modified to provide a gate there.
That's not a vehicle
No,
emergency
it's
access, right? That's
a man
an
gate.
individual.
Correct.
Pedestrian access.
Pedestrian, yeah. I didn't want to say pedestrian because it's just emergency access.
Pedestrian emergency access.
There you go. And one thing that came up, if you'll notice, our sidewalk and curbing stops just north of the driveway and loading area on the plan. Town engineer and the planner both requested that be extended all the way to the limits of the property. The applicant agrees. So rather than stopping sidewalk here, this new sidewalk is going to continue all the way to the end of their property.
Okay. Can I ask a question about that and what the curb will look like? Because you mentioned earlier that it's NJ Transit or whomever has a current, you didn't use the word easement, but access to their site. Can you just speak to what would be the future condition?
So essentially, we would end up rebuilding the depressed curb here
Okay,
to clean it up,
allowing them to maintain.
which would give them essentially another driveway ramp that would give them the access into there. I would assume that we're gonna want to sign that so that nobody thinks that's a access to anything other than transit, transit-only property, something will coordinate with transit.
Have they been consulted or? I mean, obviously they're in the surrounding property.
I can represent that they've been consulted. We haven't received any feedback from them.
Okay, thank you,
They've had the plans for several months.
thank you.
And then as I had mentioned with the existing, the proposed property is, with all the coverage, is 1.91 acres of impervious surface. This is a reduction of 0.07 acres of impervious. So I'm going to run through bulk regulations real quick, or as quick as possible. The minimum tract area required is 2 acres. This existing site, which will remain in its current configuration, is 2.22 acres, therefore compliant. Building setback requirements, Milburn Avenue is 10 feet. We are proposing to meet that 10 foot. And just for reference, the Milburn Avenue setback applies to 250 feet from the easternmost corner heading towards Essex Street. That 250-foot mark actually stops just to the west of the last front stoop that's shown on the plans. And that's right here. So this is essentially the Milburn frontage. The remaining becomes Essex. Essex has a minimum setback of 10 feet. However, up to 170 feet of the building is allowed to have a minimum permitted setback not less than 5 feet. And additionally, 70 feet of the building is allowed to have a minimum setback of 2 feet from the property line along Essex. And that is, again, from that front stoop just before the curve all the way to the end of the property. The building is in compliance with all those requirements for the building placement. On the eastern property line, right side of the page, there's a 10-foot setback requirement with the allowance of 105 feet of the building may be less than 3 feet, or not less than 3 feet, excuse me. So 10 feet for the majority, up to 105 feet may be within 3 feet. The building is also in compliance with that. And along the north side with the rail line, that is allowed to have a 1 foot minimum setback. We are proposing a minimum of 3.3 feet. Maximum building height is we're allowed 4 stories, 48 feet. There's some details on how that is measured. We are in compliance. We are proposing 46 feet, so 2 feet under the allowable. And then one of the pieces of the calculation is, at no point shall the distance from the finished floor to the adjacent grade exceed 5 feet. We are providing a maximum of 4.23 feet.
Can you speak to the number of stories in the parking garage
The-
compliant with the 4 stories?
The parking garage is 5 stories.
Right.
And it's configured so that it lines up with the floors of the building internally. Though that's not my area of expertise, so there will be testimony on that from the architect.
Okay.
But it's set up so that it'll work with the different finished floors.
Is it partially below grade?
No, it's actually flush at grade and then climbing up.
Okay. We'll wait for that. Thank you.
Maximum lot coverage, we're permitted 90%, proposed is 85.9%. Maximum building coverage is permitted to be 90% as well. We're proposing 73%. My next piece was parking, which again, requirement is not less than 1.3 spaces per unit, which equates to 194 spaces for 149 units. And as discussed, proposed is 324 spaces or 2.17 spaces per unit. Structured parking stall dimensions, required minimum of 8.5 feet by 18 feet. We are actually proposing 9 by 18 feet in the garage. Entry points are only allowed to be on Essex Street. As I've explained where the access points are, that is only on Essex Street. Surface parking, there's a surface parking requirement. We don't have surface parking, so it's not really an issue. It's not allowed between the building and the public street. There will be no parking allowed in those driveways in that drop-off area. You know, temporary, drop somebody off and move. Not parking for any period of time. Regarding loading, as I talked about, that is just north of the ingress-egress driveway. The requirement is 1 loading space with a dimension of not less than 10 feet by 35 feet. We are proposing that dimension, 10 foot in width, north-south-ish, and 35 feet off of Essex Street. You have a little bit more length as you're dealing with the curve, but you get a full 10 by 35 in that space. There's a state mandate for electric vehicle parking. I'm sure most of you are aware of. We are going to comply with that. There will be 30 EV parking spaces made ready within the parking deck. And that is 15% of the required 194, which is in accordance with state regulations. And then those are brought online 1/3 at a time at certain periods, once at CO, then I think it's 3 years and then 6 years. You get full operation. So the applicant will have at least 1/3 at time of CO and bring on the other ones in accordance with the regs, if not sooner.
And the calculation is made based upon the required parking as opposed to.
Correct.
Only the
Yeah,
one
the state,
before.
state ordinance says it's based on required parking. And technically, yeah, so it's, yes. Sorry. Get myself confused on things.
Sorry, can you restate that? 15% of the 194, which is how many?
30 spaces.
30 EV spaces, but that'll phase in over 6
They
years.
phase
So
in.
upon CO, it's 10, and then a couple years
Right, you
later.
have to do 10, you have to make ready all the spaces, 10 have to be brought online
Uh-huh.
at time of CO. The next 10, I believe it's 3 years. And
3
then
years.
it is 3? And then the second is at 6 years after the issuance of the CO.
Make ready means,
Basically plug and play. So they're ready to receive the unit. You don't have to start reconstructing all the infrastructure to be able to put them in.
Sorry, can you just clarify for me? So you're allowed 194 spots?
Required.
Or
We have to have a minimum of 194.
Okay, and you're requesting 324.
Correct.
But the EV is gonna be based on the 194, not the 324.
Yeah, the state mandate says that EV parking is based on the required parking.
Okay.
So if you can provide more parking, you still have to do what's part of the required. If you say got a variance for less parking on a site, you would still have to put in the EV based on what is required.
Right, but I guess I'm asking, so even though you're asking for this much more parking, you're not gonna up the EV?
I don't know what the intent is.
I think,
in
I
terms of-
think, well, I think your testimony is you're outlining what the legal requirement is under the regulations. Correct?
You know, I think, I can't speak for the applicant as to whether or not they plan on doing more or how they would plan on working that.
Well, I think the applicant intends to do what's being presented. If the board would like to see more EV parking spaces, that is a sentiment that we would like to hear and have an opportunity to respond to.
Do you want to hear that sentiment now? I just want to make sure, like, are you
Whenever
looking
you're,
for that
whenever you're,
feedback?
whenever you're prepared to express it, Madam Chair.
I don't want to speak for the board, but I think, one, that's how we're seeing market trends. I think if you're looking to, as a developer, certainly to attract, residents to live in the building, I would think that would be a draw. I think we're, as a community, have been committed to it and have been including it in our parking areas. So, I just did quick back of the paper math and it's 10 PM. So I'm getting about 49 spots would be required if that's 15%, 324. Someone has a calculator they can check.
Yeah, it'd be 49.
About 49 spots.
Yeah.
But you're proposing 30 spots.
Yes.
30. Well, yeah, we're proposing.
Over 6 years, so 10 at the beginning.
Yeah, we're proposing what the law requires.
Right,
But
right.
if again, we want to hear your feedback.
I would say be more aggressive with it. Go,
Okay.
I would encourage that and support that. I think we as a community would love to see that be pushed a little bit.
I also think 324 spots is an awful lot. I think it's too much parking for the building.
Yeah, I
That's
mean, I
just
think
my own
we may
personal
discuss that with the right professional, but,
Can I just ask how those spots would be out? I mean, there are obviously fewer spots than tenants, so how do those get allocated?
EV spaces don't typically get allocated because you only technically need to charge for a short period of time.
Okay, so those are not really parking spots.
sort of flex spots. Well,
Yeah, they sort of become a flex spot. The ordinance, the state ordinance actually says you're not supposed to park in them.
Okay. you're
So
there
it
to
gets a
charge.
little,
The courteous thing is to charge.
Charge and
done
move.
To get out.
right,
So they won't be
People aren't
assigned
that
to each
courteous.
other.
no, they would not be assigned.
thank you.
Certainly.
I just want to make reference for the benefit of the board that the township has codified the EV charging ordinance locally. It's contained within the township ordinance as well. So
But we match the state regulation, right?
correct, yeah, but I
so
just
it's
for the
consistent.
benefit of you all, that
Thank
it's
you.
also
Sorry,
local.
I should have said that too. I
No,
do.
no.
Thanks.
I'm gonna mark drawing CU 101, last revised February 17th, 2023 as Exhibit A5 as the utility plan.
Sorry, can I go back, Graham, and ask one more question? I'm stuck on EV parking. In the local ordinance, did we also say 15% of required or actual parking, whichever is
The
greater or
requirements
less?
based on the state model
It's based on the
ordinance.
state
Yes.
model. Thanks. Okay.
And just to confirm, those spots would be for tenants only, right? That
Correct.
would be- That any tenant could use them.
Yes. Yeah, the garage will be private for the development, not public. The spaces will be for the tenants.
So there visitor parking for guests of tenants?
Yes, that's included in the parking calculations or in the parking numbers. So yes, visitors, visiting tenants can use those spaces as well.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt your next exhibit.
No, that's okay. We're here to answer your
Yeah,
questions.
sorry, Gaston.
So if there is more demand for more EV charging stations, like, let's say all the tenants all of a sudden end up with Teslas or whatever, you're able to, like, the infrastructure is set up to be able to put enough stations in or not? Like, I know it's.
The project, the make-ready piece would only be the 15% of the required.
Okay.
So the infrastructure is there for the required. To do additional, obviously, would require more infrastructure
And
within the building.
the tenants, if they requested it, it might happen that you do put more in, or I understand there's only a certain amount required. You have to, in this community, right, a lot of people drive electric vehicles, I drive an electric vehicle, I don't know how many people do it here, but
We're all getting there.
especially this community, and just making sure that the infrastructure is put in. Because it's very important when the building is being built, that you put it in, because trying to retrofit stuff is very costly. So, and I think we've voiced this actually during the original, application, so just a note.
You did, in one of the, I can represent and maybe provide it to do for the mayor, one of the challenges in these types of projects are getting the loads from the utility companies to supply the power. So we as a society need to be able to provide the electricity that's, to meet the demand. And I can tell you in a lot of projects that I'm involved in, that's been a real challenge. They can't handle the load. So, I don't know to what extent that state regulatory requirements correspond with, the load that's available through the power companies. Suspect there was some coordination there.
Completely
but-
understand, I just, if he knows the plans though, I just wanna know if anybody's taking that into account, So,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Again, this is Exhibit A5. It's the utility plan. We're providing 2 6-inch services for water, including domestic and fire. Those are located in what I'll call the southwest corner, where Milburn starts to curve into Essex. And those are going to tie into an existing main in Milburn Avenue. In a meeting with the fire department that we had with the applicant on October 11th, 2022, we agreed to provide a fire hydrant and 2 fire department or FDC connections along Milburn Avenue. There's a FDC connection on either end of the building along Milburn Avenue, and there's a hydrant, which I'll point real quick, so you can't see it. New hydrant in this corner that we tapped off the existing 10-inch main. There will be sanitary sewer, obviously for the development. 2 laterals are going to be proposed. One is going to come off the northwest corner and tie into a manhole just north of the ingress-egress driveway. The other one is going to tie into Milburn Avenue. You can see the dark line in the middle of the front of the building tying straight in.
And the sewer, that line, what feeds into the main, could you describe where that feeds into? What I'm getting at, just so that I'm not playing hide the ball, is that now you have, I forget how many,
149.
149 units. That's a big increase, Annie says had 2 bathrooms or something like that, so.
Yeah, so I actually have some of the numbers for you, so I think it's going to answer some of your questions. Again, I'll just point out the connections so you can see them. There'll be one connection here for the main portion of the building. There'll be a secondary connection over here for this western wing of the building. The proposed project generates just over 29,000 gallons of sewage. The existing site, based on DEP calculations, generated about 3,000. So there is a 26,000 gallon a day increase. The existing 8-inch main in both Essex and Milburn, several of those manholes couldn't be opened. They were either welded shut or locked into place. So during the survey work, they couldn't be opened.
Because of flooding that they come up with.
That it's remotely possible that could be why somebody welded them shut. But our surveyors couldn't open them to verify inverts on the piping. So what I've done is the DEP regulations have a minimum allowable slope for an 8-inch line, and that is 0.3%. We suspect that both of these lines are probably steeper than that. And at some point, I don't know if the DPW can get us access into them or help with the access. We'll be able to verify all that information. But a 8-inch pipe at 0.3% provides 0.86 cubic feet per second of capacity. The 29,000 gallons that I referenced coming from this development is 0.045 cubic feet per second. That is about 1/19 of the capacity of that sewer pipe. If you start adding in peaking factors, it's about 1/10 of the capacity of that pipe. So we're confident that the existing sewer can handle the flow from the site. I think we just received, and we're going to be submitting to the town Wilson letter from the joint meeting Essex and Union County, confirming they have capacity to treat the sewage. And the reason I'm mentioning a lot of these details is because I know Graham and Martha both had comments in their letters asking about confirmation. So we're going to work with them to assure them that the pipe has capacity for this development. Obviously, we're going to have electric, gas, and telecommunications brought to the property. Everything will be below grade, no wires to the building. And there will be one existing utility pole on Essex that needs to be relocated that actually conflicts with what I call the drop-off driveway, the southern driveway entrance. That needs to shift slightly to the south. So that'll be coordinated with JCP&L.
I have a question. I don't know if this is answerable, going back to the sewage. So this is a portion of Milburn Avenue that floods. How can concerns be addressed about flooding and increased sewage that's going to be flowing through those pipes, and whether the flooding is going to have an impact?
So stormwater and sanitary flow in two separate pipe systems. Martha, I have to defer to you to know if you guys have done any inflow and infiltration studies that have assessed.
Not in this particular area that I'm aware of, but we do know that we have inflow and infiltration issues throughout town. It's not
Most
major.
towns do because
Yes,
of the history.
right. But we haven't specifically studied this area, but, in any major storm, you're gonna have surcharging of sanitary sewers
There's a
occasionally.
potential for that.
So, yes.
So to give perspective, and I'm familiar with the area, and I was joking but not joking, the reason those manhole covers were probably iron welded shut was because that area does have issues with sewage overflow, especially during storms. Superstorm Sandy, the South Mountain area in particular, had a lot of damage from that, and so that's why I'm sure that's going to be a concern for people in the area.
John, we can hook up with our DPW. We'll be able to get those manhole covers open for you.
Okay.
So we can get better data will be available.
Yeah. So the numbers I was running through should be the minimum capacity of that pipe.
Right.
We expect we've got more capacity, which I guess we can find out when we pop some more manholes.
Right.
I'm going to ask you a quick question. Do you have solid manholes, no holes to prevent inflow?
Those are probably solid covers, not vented.
Okay.
Which helps.
A lot of the older manholes had vented holes that actually let in a significant amount of water during flooding.
We replace those whenever we redo a street. we replace the Bennett's manhole covers with the solid. Just.
So a lot of it's probably more inflow, illegal connections potentially, and
Just
age,
groundwater
groundwater
infiltration
infiltration.
and cracks and joints.
Okay, well, I understand, I've heard it. I will obviously work with Martha to make sure that she's satisfied, so that she can let you guys know that we're doing everything we need to do to not exacerbate any problems.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the outside of this. I have a lighting plan drawing LL 101, same last revision date, February 17th. This would be A6, correct?
Correct.
I'm gonna run through what's on the plan and then I'll explain why I mentioned that. So we have proposed decorative post-op fixtures at a height of 14 feet along Milburn Avenue and Essex Street. We have 5 along Milburn, 6 along Essex. The poles along Milburn Avenue are set on the side of the sidewalk, right up against the property line. The ones on Essex are actually sitting in the strip between the curb and the sidewalk, along the curb line. There are 3 additional decorative post-op fixtures within the property in that front entry area where the driveways are. We also have 13 illuminated bollards. There are 5 at the drop-off entry, and there are 8 along the eastern property line sidewalk. So there's a sidewalk connection from the Milburn Avenue sidewalk along this east side of the building. We have bollard lighting there, low-level bollard lighting. The building mounted sconces are included as well. These will be LED fixtures. They will be color temperature 3000 Kelvin, which is a dark sky compliant light fixture.
Are they up facing or down?
No up facing. Dark sky doesn't allow up facing. So again, Martha and Graham had engineering planning comments on the lighting, included the light fixture selection that we were showing, height and placement. So our plan is to work closely with them to finalize the fixture selection, which is I don't know the name of the road downtown. The one you referenced?
Yes, we're using that at the other end of town where the Beehive properties were. And we also, the similar fixtures are in our downtown area already.
Right. So that was a fixture that was provided to us after we submitted. So we're gonna work with them. We do have some concerns about the height, because we have the overhead wires along Milburn Avenue, which is why we actually pushed the lights back to the right-of-way line and the property line behind the sidewalk. So again, I think it's gonna be a coordination. I know Graham had suggested a shorter height of 12 feet instead of 14 feet. So our intent is to work closely with them to come up with the best fixture, best location, and best height.
Can you characterize what lighting is there that you'll be replacing?
If I'm not mistaken, it's only Cobra head lighting on the poles.
The same number of poles, like are you maintaining the poles at the same locations or these are your?
The pole, there's no intent to remove the poles, the utility poles, because it carry a lot of overhead wiring.
Right.
And I don't think the intent is to remove the Cobra head fixtures because of the level of light they have. This is more of a pedestrian scale lighting on the sidewalk.
Was there any consideration of putting utilities below grade?
The existing utilities?
Uh-huh.
No. The cost, my first project in South Orange looked at doing the same thing. That was in 2000. It was probably for roughly the same frontage, over $2 million to put all that transmission line underneath. Now I can only imagine what it would cost.
Okay.
It's a very expensive PSE&G piece of the puzzle. I'm going to bounce to the drainage plan, which I will label A7. This is drawing CG 102 drainage plan, also last revised February 17th, 2023. This project disturbs over an acre of land, therefore it's considered a major development, and for the municipal and state regs, it is required to meet stormwater quantity, quality, and groundwater recharge. For the quantity piece of the puzzle, as I mentioned, this project reduces impervious surface by just shy of 1/10 of an acre, 0.07 acres. So in accordance with the DEP regulations, as well as the municipal regulations, we've shown that the hydrograph, which is the storm intensity over time and the volume associated with that, for the proposed conditions is less than the existing conditions. So the proposed hydrograph fits inside the existing hydrograph. That is an acceptable method to address quantity of stormwater. For quality, state and local regulations require that there's a net increase in excess of 1/4 acre of regulated motor vehicle surface, which is driveways, roadways, parking spaces, parking lots, that you need to do water quality. With the removal of the big parking lot behind, we are actually reducing motor vehicle impervious surface by 0.59 acres. So therefore, we are addressing and meeting the water quality requirements. And then the third piece of the puzzle was the recharge. This site is within a metropolitan planning area zone and is therefore not subject to groundwater recharge. The only time that sites are required to address groundwater recharge when they're in that planning zone is if they have a heavily wooded component of the site.
I have a question.
Sure.
What's happening, the existing parking lot there has a series of manhole covers that go parallel to the railroad track, basically go close to the building.
Yes.
In the parking lot.
Yep.
What's happening to those storing?
Those are going to be removed as part of this, and actually, I'm just getting into the existing and then the proposed, so you can understand
But when
everything.
you're answering that, touch on the fact that when I looked at this property a couple weeks ago, it was a dry week. There was a ton of water running through the manhole cover closest to the Milburn Commons building.
Okay,
Even
so
though
on
it was
that east,
dry,
on that
yeah,
east side.
Yeah, there was still a lot of water going through there.
Okay, so I'm gonna go over the existing
Go ahead,
conditions real
please.
quick. As I mentioned earlier, the parking lot there are existing inlets behind the building on the north side that collect the runoff from the parking lot and convey that to the east. That actually ties into an existing sewer line that's actually a municipal sewer line on the existing property that conveys runoff through the site. That is made up of a series of 18, 24, and 30-inch pipes. That runoff, and I'm gonna, so there's an existing system that runs through this portion of the site and then kind of wraps around the building. That system originates on the north side of the railroad tracks and actually collects runoff that is discharged through open pipes on the north side of the tracks from Glen Avenue to the north, residential properties, then discharges into the rail line and then eventually accumulates to a point where it gets into a flared end section, open end of the pipe, and traverses through the property. So what you were probably hearing at the manhole on that east edge was most likely water coming down from the north through the
I'm
pipe.
guessing that's the case, because the other ones were dry.
Right. So obviously there's some water continuing to flow through that. Yeah, so then, as I mentioned, it comes around the existing building and ties into an existing inlet located on the north side of Milburn Avenue. crossing Milburn Avenue, you start at the inlet on the north side. There's a 24-inch pipe that connects to a manhole in the middle of the street, and then another 24-inch pipe that ties to an inlet on the south side of the road. What we found from the survey data is the southern pipe is actually pitched in the wrong direction. It's back pitched towards Milburn Avenue, towards the north. It's not a significant back pitch, but it is not flowing in the right direction, essentially, or it's not facilitating flow in the right direction. So that is probably impeding flow to a certain extent and could be causing some issues on Milburn Avenue.
Martha, do you happen to know if that is by design?
Yeah, it's not by design.
I didn't know if it was a slow flow in
I didn't
southbound
do it,
neighborhood.
just to be
No.
clear.
Possibly could be. This is a strategy. Okay.
Could be
No, that sewer, the storm sewer pipe there, we've traced it. It goes all the way down under Cliff and it ends up at the dead end of River Road and then discharges into the Rahway River down there. So that's where that stormwater goes. This does not mix with the stormwater that's in the next development up, which is the commons.
The commons.
And that does flood.
Right.
But the two storm sewer systems are separate from each other. They take different paths. Both end up in the Rahway, but different.
So if pitched correctly, there's gonna be more water flowing down through
I don't think
South
that
Mountain.
particular pipe is collecting that much stormwater. The one that's back pitched.
It'll be more, it'll just be faster.
Well, because I know that back there where River hits where River Road hits the Rahway River has flooded. All those houses have flooded where Dan Bear lives.
That's Dan Bear's house right at the end.
Yeah, and that, the house next to it and the house next to it all flooded through the basement with sewage and other things in the last storm.
I talked to Dan Bear. He never told me that. I was not aware of that.
So six Rahway Road, full disclosure, I'm at 13 Rahway, so I lived it. 6 Rahway Road flooded. They had to redo their whole basement and one, so I guess 4 flooded. Dan's house is a little higher up, so may not have. And
What storm event was that?
the last one, whatever.
Ida?
Okay.
The monster.
Yeah, exactly. Before that, all the houses on that side, I guess on the southern side of Rahway, flooded because the river overflowed the bank, so not even having to do with the flow. Since that time, 6 Rahway was redone and had catch basins put in the back, which still did not prevent it from flooding.
So
You
the
can't
problem,
prevent the flooding.
Yeah,
Not
no,
in a-
but what
not
I'm
in an
concerned
Ida
about
type storm.
is with the sewer pipes and all the other pipes, what flooded in 6 Rahway was partially water coming up, but also water coming in from slop sinks, toilets, stuff like that.
Yeah, and that system is also not connected to the sanitary system, takes a different route. It all ends up at Gilbert Place, but it's not the same system that was affecting the,
Yeah, unfortunately, that answer doesn't help because Gilbert
I
Place,
know.
as you know, was arguably even worse.
so the pipe that you're talking about that is pitched improperly is on the NSS property?
No, it's in
No,
Milburn
it's across
Avenue.
the street.
It's in Milburn Avenue.
So there's 2 sections of pipe. You have an existing inlet on the north side here. You have a 24-inch that comes to a manhole. Also existing. And then from that existing manhole to this catch basin on the south side, this pipe is slightly pitched the wrong way.
And the pipe that's running through your property,
That is pitched in, the existing pipe that runs through and kind of wraps the building here is properly pitched.
and you'll be keeping,
No, we're replacing that. About to get into the proposal.
yeah, they're not gonna build the building over our existing drainage system. That will all be taken out of service and we have to vacate the easements. We have easements there, those will be vacated. Well, but all of that storm sewer that did go in those pipes will now be collected in that one single pipe that comes down the side of the building.
and we have enough capacity for that. The pipe will be big enough to to have the same capacity that it has
It's
currently
the-
today?
The stormwater
Yes.
should be reduced. It's less stormwater that'll be entering the system than what currently goes into the system. It's less impervious coverage.
So I have some of the numbers that'll answer some of those questions for you next. Obviously, we have stormwater to deal with the proposed building. So we have subsurface collection conveyance system. There are going to be 2 trench drains, one each located at the driveway connections to Essex Street. Those will capture the runoff from the driveway entrances. That will be conveyed down to a new inlet in Essex Street, just south of the driveway. That's going to be here. This is an existing inlet. That's going to connect down to that existing inlet. So 2 trench drains conveyed down to here. Martha had requested that this inlet be moved, I believe it was you, Martha, be moved a little further south so that there's no conflict when cars are turning into the site, no tires running over the inlet structure. So the applicant agrees, move that down about 5 feet. That's going to help collect some of the runoff. With the inlet in the roadway, it's going to help collect some of the runoff from Essex Street before it all gets down to that lower inlet that exists. So now you have 2 inlets collecting what 1 inlet was collecting before. The existing conveyance system, so
How is it gonna capture the water that's coming off from on the other side of the railroad track? Because isn't that what you're
So-
saying, all that water's
well-
coming off of that? And it's gonna then come down, so how is it capturing that water?
So this portion has nothing to do with the railroad.
No, that side of it.
Right. So this side, again, is a pipe that comes down.
Yeah.
The site connects over into it, and then it follows the angle of the building, because the building steps, and then it angles back to get to this existing inlet. So it sort of comes down and then wraps the building corner. We are going to remove that pipe after we construct a new pipe. Essentially, we're going to recreate the existing conveyance system, just moving it to the property line.
And picking up everything that it currently, the system
Right, so
that's
this
in
is,
place up in that corner, on the northeast corner.
yes.
That's where that comes in from underneath the train
So
tracks.
one of the improvements was the mention of a doghouse manhole on the adjacent property. That is going to go on to the existing conveyance system. From that point, that's, everything north of that that's running into that is still going to go there. We put that doghouse manhole in, and then we're going to rebuild the system that runs down to Milburn Avenue as well as crosses Milburn Avenue. So we're essentially mimicking the pipe sizes, 18-inch, 24-inch to 30-inch, as you come down the east portion of the site. As it starts to turn towards Milburn Avenue, due to depth of cover, we are transitioning to dual 24-inch pipes. So the 30-inch pipe will then connect to a manhole structure. Leaving that will be dual 24-inch pipes. That's going to run down to Milburn, follow along the curb line of Milburn underneath the sidewalk, and then across Milburn. We're going to be providing a new combination manhole inlet structure, a new manhole in the roadway, and a new catch basin on the opposite side to facilitate the 2 24 inches. Right now, there's 1 24-inch pipe coming across. So we're essentially recreating the capacity of the existing system as it comes through the site. We're increasing the capacity that comes across Milburn Avenue because you had a 30-inch pipe, municipal pipe in the easement, a 24-inch pipe coming from the building tying into the existing inlet. The discharge from that was a 24-inch pipe.
So can I just, I think I understand that, you're basically taking what flows out today and it will flow away possibly twice as quickly or however, you're 24 now, it's 2 24s.
Yes.
Then what will it be received on the other side?
What you gave me didn't tell me what was on the other side of that.
That's still
Coming out of
the
that, coming out of
misangled pipe?
that catch basin.
Where, on the north side?
No, on the south side.
Of Milburn
Oh, the
Avenue.
south side, there's another basin over on the south side.
Yeah, no, we're going all the way to that one. The map you had provided me didn't tell me what the pipe was coming out of that.
But that will stay the same.
I don't know what.
That's, the
Yeah,
intent is
okay.
that would stay the same. We'd improve everything down to the south side of Milburn Avenue.
Will new easements be required
Yes.
on lot 1, lot 2?
The intent is not to put an easement on lot 2, just on lot 1.
And utilize the existing easement on lot 2? Because didn't you say the doghouse manhole's on lot 2?
We'll have to get.
Yeah, there will have, you're correct.
We'll have to get.
There will have to be an easement in that very northeast corner for the doghouse manhole as it crosses back into our property.
And will that be an easement that will run in favor of Milburn?
Yes.
Or- Okay, so eventually that system will be taken over by the
Correct.
township.
Yep, that's the intent, is to replace the existing township system with a new one, remove the old easement, provide a new easement.
I noticed you looked at Martha, but she wasn't listening, so.
Just making sure we're in agreement that we're gonna replace the sewer system and the easement.
The
At the same
easements,
time.
the existing easements will be vacated,
New
new
easements will be
easements will
created.
be created, all be recorded at the county. It'll all be done.
And that will be part of our system, is that correct?
It becomes part of our system.
Thank
It's
you.
conveying our township water as it crosses underneath
Right.
the train tracks. And, you know, for the most part, I don't think, John, you're tying into that new pipe along the side, are you? at
Yeah,
all?
we are.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, so the parking garage ties,
Oh, the parking
the
garage, right?
inlets on the north side tie in,
Okay.
parking garage ties in. The main building is actually gonna tie into the front,
Okay.
similar to what was going on with the
Mhm.
existing building.
So can I just, so if I understand, so there's gonna be all this new piping that's gonna be coming along the side, going under Milburn Avenue, that's all new piping, larger 224-inch, and then it's connecting on the southern side of Milburn Avenue to a basin, and then the outflow is back into the existing Milburn system.
Yeah, I mean, the new pipe will be part of the Milburn system.
Okay,
It's going into the existing piping that, the
okay.
piping that exists
And do we
currently.
know that the existing Milburn system can handle the new piping that's coming in from this project on the south
So-
side?
Physically, the piping or the
From-
flow of the stormwater?
Either or.
So we are, when we do engineering design, our first assumption is that the system can handle what it's taking now. We are reducing both the peak rate of runoff and the volume of runoff from this site. So less runoff will be incorporated into this conveyance system. So it should make it work better.
Even during a flood.
My response to people with that is now, that's a loaded question. Because it depends on the flood you're talking about. Ida, as Martha can attest, was a historic flooding event. There are no sewer systems in the state, probably in the country, designed to handle and convey 500 and 1,000-year storm events. It's
A
just,
typical storm sewer system, municipal storm sewer system is for a 25-year storm. That's what it's designed to. That was like a 500-year storm that we got during Ida. It was short, but the intensity of it was the equivalent of a 500-year storm. So no sewer system anywhere is going to be able to convey that amount of flow. So we can't, and they're showing reductions in the volume of flow as compared to the existing condition. So it shouldn't make it worse. If anything, it will make it better for the most part and incrementally better for during a flood event. But during a flood event, we can't expect our storm sewer system to be able to handle those kinds of flows. It's just not designed for that.
Can I ask a question? Why again aren't the like groundwater retention tanks or something like that? Like I know in Pingree, they put in these large vessels underneath the
stormwater management devices.
Yes, exactly. So why aren't they
So-
required in this one?
The DEP allows you 3 different paths to address stormwater quantity. One of those paths, which is the path we chose, is to prove that this proposed hydrograph, which is the peak rate as well as the total volume, is less than the existing.
Right.
If you can prove that, then you're not required to move to the stormwater detention and reduction requirements. We were able to successfully do that because we are reducing impervious surface.
Just for that 0.07.
Yep, it's enough to keep, just, you think if I have all this pervious or all this impervious and I make a little bit of impervious, I should have less runoff at a lower rate. What they probably did at the other school is, or did you say school?
It is school,
Yeah. I thought you said Pingree or something.
Pingree.
Yes. That probably had an increase in impervious coverage. When you have an increase in impervious coverage, by default, you have no choice but to provide stormwater management, stormwater reductions. So you have to reduce the peak rate by putting in a detention system that holds it back and slows the release.
Okay, just concerned that we do have a flooding issue right downtown, and anywhere we can actually make an improvement, I hope we do it, and I agree the 0.07 is good, but I wish we'd do better.
What's the cutoff?
For,
0.04? Just
Sorry,
anything better, anything improvement.
you mean,
Yeah.
at what point do you have to start doing the detention systems?
Mhm.
If you can't show that the proposed hydrograph fits under the existing. So,
You gave the number of 0.07, so.
well, no, he meant the 0.07 was actually our reduction in
Okay.
impervious.
Okay.
In a straight math to math, 0 increase in impervious, 0 decrease in impervious, the two curves are gonna match. So as soon as you add a little bit of impervious, you should be outside the curve, and now you have to do the management piece.
Okay. So this is
Just
a
on a straightforward math.
reduction of 0.07, so that's below.
That's bringing us down. So real quick, the existing 24-inch pipe on the north side of Milburn Avenue, which is the one that's sloped in the right direction, based on those inverts, has a capacity of 30 cubic feet per second. This is actually slightly less than the anticipated flow for a 25-year design storm, which is closer to 35 cubic feet per second, CFS. Again, our proposed condition is reducing that. So that existing single 24-inch pipe technically is inadequate to convey the runoff that could be coming through that pipe in a 25-year storm event. By providing the 24-inch pipes, we're increasing that capacity from 30 to about 51 CFS. As I mentioned, we're reducing peak discharges and volumes. The 2-year storm has a peak discharge of 6.99, the proposed is 6.85. 10-year existing is 10.87, proposed is 10.72. And 100-year is 18.44, we're proposing 18.29, and that's all in cubic feet per second. So that's the peak runoff. Volume-wise, we also have reductions. 2-year storm, there's about a 2% reduction in runoff. 10-year, there's a 1.5% reduction, and the 100-year, there's about a 1% reduction in the volume of runoff from the property.
I have a question. In flat roofs, and are those considered impervious?
All roof is impervious. Yeah. Flat, slope, also.
And so that's all calculated?
That's all calculated. There was a comment about the plans not identifying what's happening in the courtyard. I don't remember which professional had it, but we're going to add the information that shows the inlets and the conveyance. We did account for the runoff from that courtyard as part of the global design of the project and the total impervious. Those inlets in the courtyard will connect into the roof leader system and discharge out into the conveyance system around the site.
Can I ask where we are in our testimony? I usually like to call meetings at 10:30. I've been letting you go because I feel like you're getting close to the end. But that also means that we're gonna have to invite you back for questions.
I'm going to be back either way, so.
We'll be kicking
that's-
off our next meeting with more questions, probably from the board and questions from
Well,
the
yeah.
public for you.
But-
But
John, what's your estimation on
My last piece
Stormwater,
was.
well, on
sorry,
stormwater, forget the review letters. How much longer do you have on stormwater?
I'm done.
You're done with
Stormwater, I'm done. Next
So
piece.
stormwater is done. This actually may be a good time to break. The balance, I think, of his testimony is to address review letters.
Correct.
And then after that, open it to the board and public for questions. So
I think that makes sense, and it might be a good place to put a pin in it. Well, I will let you ask a couple questions from the board. But then I think once you go through the review letters, we'll also use that sort of as a summary maybe next time or recap, so that we can kick it off with questions, because I know the public is here, and I thank you all for coming, and I'm sorry that we're not gonna get into a big question session, but I think it's better for all of our brains that we're hearing it fresh. But go ahead, Dave, I wanna let you
Just
ask.
a quick question, the courtyard that you just talked about, that's gonna be, the drains are gonna be connected into the system. Is that, are you accounting that courtyard as part of the impervious surface? when
Yes.
you're making your
There's
calculations, so we're not as part of the impervious?
it is part of the impervious, yes.
Okay.
It's fully encompassing.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
That was it.
Okay, that's great. I think that said, are we carrying to the May 3rd meeting? Is that the intention?
I think
I guess I just want to confirm. Would I make a motion to carry? Or do I just state that I'm carrying?
Do we know how much time we're gonna get on May 3rd? Are we the only one here? or-
Are you the
I believe at this point, we haven't scheduled that, and at this point, it's too late to schedule anybody new because they didn't have to get their notice and done, so we.
So we would have the whole night on May
the whole
3rd?
night.
Okay, great.
Do I make a motion or do I just declare it?
No, just declare it.
Okay, we will carry the meeting with Mr. Di Jacinto, et cetera, and team and beyond to May 3rd, 7:30 PM here at Town Hall, with no required notice.
No further notice.
No
by the
further
applicant.
notice required. I move to conclude tonight's meeting. Second. Second. All in favor? Aye. Good evening.
Thank you.
I like it.